All right. Hey, I want to welcome everyone to the December 1st, 2022 online meeting of the Seattle Design Commission. Our hybrid meetings, one which we are doing today, are designed to meet the governor's executive orders allowing for hybrid meetings as a result of the COVID pandemic. Our meetings are being recorded through WebEx, which are posted later on our website. We have one item this morning from 9 until noon, and it's the final review of the North 130th Street station by Sound Transit. The action today will be led by Jill, and the discussion will be led by Elaine Wine. Sorry?
Jill's leading
the action. Okay, sorry, thank you. Jill Crary will be leading our action today. Thank you, Jill. We'll have a brief break from noon until 12:30, and from 12:30 to 1:30, we'll have a short business section. The team will be providing the format for our meeting. The team will be providing shortly a briefing on the final proposal for North 130th Street Station. We'll have an opportunity for public comment following. And once the presentation is complete, each commissioner will ask clarifying questions. I think we'll start with commissioners in the room and then go to our commissioners who are attending virtually. After questions, there will be an opportunity for deliberation and then our action today. We will start with, for deliberation, we'll start with commissioners attending virtually and then followed by commissioners attending in person. Our meeting minutes are generally available about a month after the meeting today. We do.
We can't hear you, but you may know that already.
Right, we are back in business. Where was I? Oh, we were needing more coffee this morning. Why don't we go ahead and start? So there will be an opportunity for public comment. I will look and see if anyone who's attending virtually has a comment to make. Same way with people that are attending in person. Public comments are allowed for 2 minutes, and we'll recognize you accordingly. If for whatever reason you didn't have an opportunity to comment today, you can follow up to us in email. While we have this all working, why don't we start with introductions, and we'll start with introductions of commissioners in the room, followed by commissioners attending virtually, and then we'll have introductions of our presenters. And I'll start to my left, and then commissioners, if there are any disclosures, and if you could also indicate your position on it.
I'm Molly Layton-Cody, Transport Union Planner, position commissioner.
Hi, Jill Crary, at-large commissioner.
Molly Spitalnik, I'm the Get Engaged Commissioner and an Urban Designer.
Benita Sidhu, Landscape Architect Commissioner.
Thank you. And why don't we start with Elizabeth, then Elaine, followed by Pooja.
Elizabeth Connor, Artist Commissioner. Good morning.
Elaine Wine, Architect Commissioner. Good morning.
I think Pooja's recusing.
Oh, we've lost, I'm not sure that Pooja is still with us, and we will be joined, I think we're also being joined virtually by our Commissioner Matt Alves, who's one of our architects. Why don't we have the presenters introduce themselves as well? Osama, do you want to lead that round, or Catherine?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Catherine Calvert, Principal Architect, Sound Transit.
Thank you, Catherine.
Osama Kota, Element Architecture and Sound Transit.
Lena Yet, Landscape Architect, HNCB.
So she's project manager, public art.
Glenn Williams with Element Architects.
Randy Harlow, I'm the Executive Project Director for Sound Transit for the.
And we have two other people. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Julie Montgomery, Sound Transit's Director of Architecture.
Thank you, Julie.
And I'm Patrice Carroll from the City of Seattle, Office of Planning and Community Development, who's going to work on the stationary plan.
Thanks, Patrice. And for staff, I'm Michael Jenkins, Director of the Commission.
Valerie Pinas, the coordinator of the mission.
And Wendy Vandeker, also design staff.
Julia Acevedo, staff.
Thanks, Julia. Okay, I think we're ready. We've got screens monitoring both ways, so we'll make sure that there aren't hopefully any more hiccups. Did you want to kick us off today, Catherine?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to ask Randy to kick us off.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Chair Sue and Commissioners. My name's Randy Harlow. I'm Sound Transit's Executive Project Director for the Northeast 130th Street Infill Station project. And today, I have the privilege of kicking off our team's presentation of a 90% design for a station that's been in front of the Commission several times, most recently in February of this year, as the design has progressed through a pandemic, no less, to forward Sound Transit's mission to connect more people to more places. The project before you today represents the results of a partnership with the city that's allowed us to bring the project forward in time, 5 years from the original ST3 timeframe of 2031 to delivery in 2026 through stalwart efforts of the combined team, culminating in today's presentation. So, initial work on the base structure of the station is underway, integrated with the work of the Linwood Link extension, as described in previous presentations. In the past, we've spent a lot of time discussing the tools and palette at our disposal, and this time we're here to show how those tools and that palette have been employed to define and form the station. I'd like to now turn the presentation over to our principal architect for the station project, Catherine Calvert, to commence this morning's presentation.
Next slide, please. Good morning, and thank you everybody for joining this presentation. We have an agenda of what we intend to talk about today. We've already completed our introductions, and I just wanted to run through our other topics. First of all, we're going to start with an overview of the Northeast 130th Station. We recognize that several of the commissioners have not had a chance to look at the project in previous presentations, so we'll start with some of the basic fundamentals of the station design. Then we're going to review the comments that we have received at previous STC sessions. Then we're going to go through the artist selection process, which has been a major effort since we spoke last. Then we're going to talk about station design updates, and then finally have a brief look at the station completion schedule and conclude with questions and comments. We're going to do this as sort of a tag team presentation so that we have the voices of art and architecture and landscape all woven into the presentation. Next slide, please. All right, so this slide is, as I mentioned, just a very simple overview of the station for those of you who may be less familiar with it. So the station is located in a very narrow piece of land between the I-5 and Fifth Avenue Northeast, and with the cross street of Northeast 130th Street. It was included in our 2016 ST3 plan as an infill station, and the timing in that plan meant that the design would not even start until 2024, with the plan for the station to open in 2031. Along the way, the station schedule was accelerated, so the design work has been going on for the past couple of years. The infrastructure part of the station is underway, as Randy mentioned, and the current scheduled opening date is 2026. In terms of configuration, it's an elevated side platform station, so that means the guideway and the tracks run through the middle of the station with platforms on either side, serving the north and southbound directions. And it has an estimated daily boardings between 3,100 and 3,600 people. The images that you see in the lower left there are two of the Linwood Link stations. This will be the 5th station of the Linwood Link extension. So there's architectural relationships between the design of the other stations and the Northeast 130th station. Next slide.
So as we zoom in a little bit, we wanted to give an overview of how the project sits within the neighborhoods and its relationship back to those neighborhoods. So you guys are familiar with Sound Transit presentations and our kind of continually shifting north arrows. So in this presentation, north is generally to the right, just to help orient everybody here. And I think it's worth noting that 130th is in a really interesting location. It connects unique in-city neighborhoods with strong residential and commercial communities. The culturally diverse Lake City Urban Village is to the east of the station, and the Broadview, Holler Lake neighborhoods and Bitter Lake Urban Village is west of I-5 and west of the station. In addition, the station sits directly on existing and future north-south bicycle infrastructure that will connect the station to kind of the network of neighborhoods, both to the north and south of it. Next slide. And as we looked at the neighborhood, it was additionally important to us and for the team to connect the architecture, the landscape, and the art specifically to this place. As you guys have heard from us before, Thornton Creek has an important natural and cultural presence in the neighborhoods. It's important for the community, and it was really an important driver for the work that we were doing. There are also important Coast Salish cultural connections to this place. The landscapes and the vegetation of this part of the city. Many of you probably know Licton Springs, but Bitter Lake is also an important Coast Salish place, Holler Lake as well. And then, of course, to the west of our site and the station is Ingram High School. It's quite close to the station, and our artist, Ramson Bustillo, who Lucille will touch on in a bit, is an Ingram graduate, which was really important for us because as we started to work with him, he brought some really important insights to the community about the recent history of the neighborhood and kind of the cultural connections and the recent cultural connections to the place. Next slide. So I think this is pretty important because this is a unique station. It's an infill station, as we mentioned earlier. And while it's part of a larger network, it has a really constrained site. And when we started on the project, not only was the site predefined and constrained, but the guideways and the guideway columns were also predetermined. So we had a very tight kind of sandbox to work in. The project is also against I-5. And in addition to all of that, the guideway is currently under construction, which means that as we're designing the station, thinking about constructability and sequencing all came into play. They really dictated the linear form and the linear nature of the station, as well as the side platform access that we have on the station. So all of that was predetermined as we worked through this. Next slide. And then, there's a lot of work that had already been done kind of in the neighborhoods, and we really tried to dive into this to really understand the city neighborhood plans, as well as their urban design frameworks, to think about creating important connections for the neighborhoods across I-5 and how the station might contribute to that, but also how the station could contribute to the neighborhood's desire for a strong, diverse sense of place, as well as sustainable development with a mix of mixed modal connectivity. Next slide.
Building upon the urban design frameworks that for the Lake City and Bitter Lake communities, the Seattle Office of Planning and Community Development has also been working on comprehensive planning for the Northeast 130th and 145th station areas. This work includes a statement of neighborhood vision that reflects the aspirations of the community. This includes the neighborhood being lively, walkable, and welcoming, that there be tree-lined sidewalks and other green infrastructure, that there be bicycle infrastructure that's enjoyable and safe, a broad range of affordable housing options, shops and cafes near the transit station, and abundant greenscapes and unique cultural events easily reached by walking, biking, or transit. You can see in the diagram on the right that has been taken from the station area plan that the station really forms a node for all of the cultural and community assets around it. Our city planner, Patrice Carroll, has joined us for the meeting today and can answer any specific questions about the ongoing development of this planning work. Next slide. To orient you to the site, we'll walk you through the main elements of the plaza level organization working from south to north. The platform, of course, is up on the upper level above this with the guideway passing through. The South Plaza is where most patrons are expected to access the station, either by bus, bicycle, or foot. Adjacent to this are the main elements of vertical circulation, stairs, elevators, and escalators, illustrated in blue. The Central Plaza faces Fifth Avenue Northeast and includes the station's back-of-house support spaces, such as electrical, mechanical, and security facilities. That's in yellow. To the north is a second set of elevators and stairs with a grade change down to the North Plaza. Finally, the northernmost part of the station includes a drop-off loop for vehicles and service parking, as well as a large landscaped area with a bioretention feature. We will look at each of these areas in greater detail as the presentation progresses.
For the station's landscape design concept, we were inspired by the nearby Thornton Creek, which many members of the community expressed having a sense of source of neighborhood pride in, as well as naturalistic elements such as boulders. So in this design, we show this concept by, one, revealing the movement of water through the use of stormwater elements, two, using landscape boulders to simulate stream cobbles. And you'll see we sprinkle these out through the streetscape planting, the bioretention areas, and also we have some in our hardscape. And three, using the form of plantings to mimic the form of streams. Next slide. Now let's zoom out. As Osama mentioned earlier, we're designing within this larger network. We're designing a station within a regional light rail system. To maintain continuity between the corridor and all of the stations, we include planting mixes that match other plantings along the Linwood Link corridor, as well as site elements such as the standard plaza paving and site furnishings. Next slide. Station access is anticipated to be split between pedestrian, bike, bus, and vehicular modes, with 80% of passengers arriving at the south end of the station. In the table below, you can see the estimated PM peak volumes within a 3.5-hour period. Next slide.
Each project in the Sound Transit 3 system plan included dedicated funding for improvements that make it easier for people to walk, bike, or roll to the transit stations. For the Northeast 130th infill station, that allowance is approximately $4.9 million in year of expenditure dollars. Sound Transit has worked closely with the City of Seattle on the design development of the station itself, and that coordination also extends to the potential uses of this funding. This partnership is important because, generally speaking, Sound Transit's preference is to have our local jurisdiction partners lead the implementation of improvements funded by the access allowance. As of now, Sound Transit expects to contribute a large portion of this funding in support of various improvements to pedestrian, bicycle, and transit access along the east-west corridor that includes Northeast 130th Street, Roosevelt Way, and Northeast 125th Street. SDOT will be launching a design process to define the scope of improvements early next year that will also be supported by federal, state, and local funds. Next slide. Over the past 3 years, we've worked closely with King County Metro, WashDOT, SDOT, and SDOT on our design and permitting process. On behalf of Sound Transit, we want to recognize that due to everyone's involvement, the project will better serve the public, and we thank everyone for their time and input. our agency project partners, some of whom are attending the presentation today, will have an opportunity to add comments at the conclusion of this presentation. Previous presentations have described Sound Transit's extensive outreach process that was completed in 2020, which included workshops, group discussions, and surveys presented in a diverse variety of languages and forums to reach as many participants as possible. This outreach effort engaged over 6,200 participants. In our outreach process, we received a wide variety of responses from participants when it came to describing the neighborhoods around the station area. Many shared memories of stations that they've been to in other cities outside of Washington State and what excites or worries them about changes coming to their neighborhood. There were responses celebrating the natural beauty of the area and the great cultural diversity of the neighborhood. Many identified the area as an urban oasis away from the big city, considering it the secret neighborhood of Seattle. The substantial amount of feedback collected has been taken into consideration by the design team and also shared with the artist to ensure that the final design integrates the unique character of this neighborhood and captures elements that make this location special. As will be seen in the design presentation, the key elements reflect the desire for a modern design and community appreciation and pride in Thornton Creek. For example, the station design embraces linearity through incorporation of clean lines, modern finishes, and use of the blue color that was preferred by the community. The community's pride in Thornton Creek is reflected in the landscape forms, play of water, and selection of plants to be evocative of creek bed plant communities. The plazas have ample gathering spaces and amenities such as seating, including the use of natural boulders, which were identified as desirable by the community. Other elements such as bollards include a more modern metal type that also was preferred by the community. Participants wanted the station to be both beautiful and safe. And as will be seen in our presentation, both of these attributes are fully expressed in the final design. The art will further build upon the outreach previously done with the community. Lucille will describe the artist's plan for engagement that will allow direct contribution of community members to art-making activities, and their feedback will guide the specific forms that the art will express. Next. So just to recap the previous presentation. So this project was last reviewed by the full SDC on the 3rd of February of this year with two conditions. One was that we focus on artist selection and art integration. The other was to develop an architectural identity for the station. Other recommendations included specific design response to community input, as I've just described, advancing the accessible and multimodal design aspects, and enhancing the experience of the public spaces. Then there was a follow-on review by subcommittee in April. And I'll just go ahead and read these recommendations just so that we have them fresh in our memories. From the April meeting, it was important for us to reduce the opacity of finishes at the ground level, particularly at the south and north entries, to concentrate on creating areas of delight for passengers through architectural detailing or enhancing visual communication between spaces, to use color strategically to enhance the horizontal lines of the station, to create a cohesive story between planting and bioretention areas, to focus on distinctiveness of the landscape and the ground plane, to further develop the interpretive signage, to employ the art to enhance the three-dimensional quality of the spaces, to ideally select an artist with building integration experience, and finally, to engage both the Arts Commission and the Public Art Advisory Committee of the Office of Arts and Culture. I'm going to turn it over to Lucille to discuss the art selection process.
Thank you, Catherine. Next slide, please. To begin with, I wanted to give you all, and especially for our new commissioners joining us today, a quick recap of the art procurement process and the timeline. What was developed since we last met with the SDC, as well as the SDC subcommittee in April, as well as what we're planning for over the next few months. As Catherine mentioned, on April 14, an SDC subcommittee that focused on design, landscape, and the artwork integration was presented with our plan and timeline for the art procurement. If you look at both timelines that we are presenting today and the one we presented in April, you'll see that we've been successfully following through on the commitment made back then. In May of 2022, the 3 finalists that were selected through the first round of selection were taken on a site visit of the station's construction site and were given compensation for them to prepare and present an in-depth site analysis. This allowed the selected artists to gain insight into the site constraints and the site plans. This direction for the selection, as opposed to what we usually do, a standard interview process, portfolio review, was taken to further adhere to the subcommittee's recommendation to give the selected artist a head start on design. On May 17, 2022, a panel of members from the art and design community, together with neighborhood representatives, selected the artist Ramson Regarde-Bustillo to develop the design for the station artwork. SD Art worked with the director of the Seattle Art Program to identify a diverse array of individuals to sit on the selection panel. Finally, in response to the subcommittee's recommendations, SD Art is planning on presenting to the Public Art Advisory Committee in the spring of 2023. Conversations have already started with the staff to get on the schedule. Next, please. So a little background on our selected artist, Ramson Bustillo. Born on the island of Mindanao in the Philippines, Ramson Regarde-Bustillo is a Seattle-based artist. Bustillo integrates a printmaking foundation with a transdisciplinary practice. His layered work and immersive collaborations are tied to his Philippine lineage, as well as his South Seattle Pacific Northwest upbringing and his research travels. Ramson's work nurtures the act of examining and re-examining one's place in society and the process of ideation. In his works, personal narratives are told through universal themes of belonging and perseverance. Ramson's selection marks the first artwork by a Filipino artist to join the SD Art collection. Ramson Bustillo has been under contract with Sound Transit since July 2022 and has been working hard on developing an early concept with recurrent meetings with the project team, the architects, as well as recurrent site visits to deliver a work plan for the whole project, as well as preliminary designs that I'm very happy to share with you today and that you will see peppered through our renderings of the station. The quote on the slide over here was taken directly from the artist's presentation during the interview process, and I'll read it to you. Community engagement has a role in my public art process. My art practice has a research and social practice component. I am also an art educator. I would hold open art-making workshops in nearby neighborhoods to be in community, listen, and dialogue. This quote I wanted to highlight because it really underscores Ramson's community-centric approach to making public art. I want to emphasize also that the artwork that you will see integrated into the renderings today, though it does look final, is still very much a work in progress, as future community engagement efforts will inform the designs. The scope of the work, however, the location, the materials, are for the most part final. Ramson Bustillo is also a transit rider. He's only moving through the city by bus and link light rail, which really gives him a unique perspective to deliver a project that addresses riders' needs and aspirations. Next, please. So the next few slides will show you some of Ramson Bustillo's past work and his range as an artist. This image is from Ramson's portion of the exhibition Yellow No. 5, which was on view at Bellevue Art Museum in 2020. This gallery shot shows Ramson's use of bold color, his play with layering and materiality, and his ability to take over and common space here, which is over 800 square feet gallery space. Next, please. These are two examples of Ramson's more intimate work from his studio practice. On the left, Khadija of Rainier Valley, and on the right, Dante Waiting for the No. 7, which is actually a piece that is owned by the City of Seattle Portable Works Collection. These portraits are portraits of South Seattle transit riders. There is a connection with transit as well from his past work, which really exemplify the layered and infinitely detailed aspect of Robson's work. Next. To talk a little bit more about Robson's experience with building integrated artwork, this rendering really shows Robson Bustillo's range as a public artist and how the different applications of his practice all connect back together to deliver meaning and a sense of place. This rendering of the Howell Street building of the new convention center shows how well Robson is making use of fabricating material, here enameled glass, to showcase his layered work, both monumental, bold, lively, but also intricate and detailed. It's the minutiae of those details that give passersby a renewed experience every time they walk by the artwork. This mixture between large scale and design layering is very much indicative of Robson's vision for the Northeast 130th Station artwork. Next, please. Now, these images are taken directly from the artist section process presentation and show his mental trajectory in approaching the project from a very empiric starting point. As Robson experienced the site for the first time, he was reminded of his own culture. The elevated station brings up memories of traditional Filipino and Southeast Asian dwellings, that's the images that you can see on the left there. The image on the right shows his artistic process, looking for elements of distinction to highlight, to create a language of glyphs that would be unique to the station and the site and to the neighborhood context, and be at once conscious of its utilitarian function as a transit facility, but also sourced through personal roots and his artistic practice. Next. As I mentioned earlier, Robson Bustillo's work often includes a component that is centered around community. In developing the artwork design for the station, Robson is intending on holding several community workshops to develop and identify elements that will be an integral part of the design and expand his library of glyphs that will tell the story of the station and the community. Robson is also intending on reaching back out to the members of the selection panel that selected him, which included staff from his alma mater, as Osama mentioned earlier, in Graham High School, some community actors, some artists who both worked and resided in the area, as well as members of the Seattle Arts Commission and staff from the Office of Arts and Culture. A temporary art project is also in development to further and more closely utilize the outcomes of these community workshops. As mentioned earlier in the timeline, SD Art is communicating to the Public Art Advisory Committee our intention to present Robson's work early in 2023. At this point, I want to mention that the color palette supplied by the artist that will present to you today is very indicative of the final artwork, though it may slightly shift as the design gets refined. Bustillo is working closely with the team and the station architects and responding dynamically to the station's colored schemes, the patterns, and the landscape to fully integrate the artwork into a cohesive whole and that will welcome passengers and neighbors. So back in the early planning stages, SD Art had identified the station as a great opportunity to apply an equity lens to our selection process and therefore made plans for the station artists to be under a design-only contract. Design-only contracts allow us to broaden the field of considered artists and sometimes enable an artist with an emerging public art practice to be set up for success through working with SD Art's project managers on artwork integration and SD Art's pool of on-call fabricators to fabricate the artworks. This site map shows the extent of the artwork throughout the station. Following SDC's subcommittee recommendations, the artwork will span the south entrance guideway column and the entire entry, providing riders with portals into the station both north and south, allowing Robson to play on the three-dimensionality of the station's architecture, as well as giving him a canvas to fully unfold his aesthetic experience for the station. The art will span the whole length of the station across 3 modes of fabrication. First, the painted artwork on the guideway column at the south entrance will provide a landmark for passengers as they approach the station, both on foot or driving through. The artwork wraps around the entrances and leading into the lobbies, north and south, will be fabricated in porcelain enamel, which is one of the most durable methods of artwork fabrication. There is a sample, a prototype of an other artwork fabricated in porcelain enamel that is shown over here, and I'd be happy to show it to the camera later on. The unique design of the stair enclosures and will follow the passengers as they make their way through and toward the vertical circulation and ticket vending machines. The ancillary wall artwork at the center of the station will be translated and fabricated into porcelain tile. So the philosophy behind hiring one single artist to design the artwork for the whole station, as extensive as it seems, is very much intentional. The goal is to deliver a continuous thread throughout the span of the station and highlight the various station architectural features. We're very confident that Romson has the appropriate experience and support to deliver on this goal successfully. Romson's intention is to design artwork that has a high visual impact, but that is also layered with a multitude of details, allowing passengers to discover new elements every time they visit the station, and to hopefully recognize themselves through these design elements.
You want to go to the next slide or no? So since 60% design, we continue to focus on elements of continuity that connect the station across the network. And that's really important to us because it's important that riders understand where they are along the larger Sound Transit corridor, that we can use the architectural materials in a sense of that a means of wayfinding. But we also focused on moments of distinction that are unique to this station expression within the neighborhood. Lucille and Lena touched on the landscape and public artwork, and it was our goal that the overall station design work to weave the landscape, the art, and the station identity together, with moments of delight and character sprinkled throughout. Lena's bioretention areas utilize runoff and focus on habitats around Thornton Creek, while the architecture and landscape paving both use the same grid to organize the various elements that they pull together. We've been working closely with Romson so that his art wraps around the architecture, highlighting entry points and welcoming riders into the station as the art captures the community identity and expression. And then the last time we were here, we talked about the blue station accents, and we really went and refined how we use them. It was really important to us to bring clarity to where the color was used and really use it as an element of wayfinding that highlights the vertical circulation and while drawing patrons in and through the station itself. If you go to the next slide, this is a rendering of the South Plaza. And after conversations with the Design Commission, we really focused on the idea of increasing transparency throughout, both at the plaza levels as well as up at the guideways. And here we really looked at providing more transparency around the stairs, where we're using a perforated metal panel that really exposes the movement as people as they move up and down the station. We also had stacked bicycle storage, and so we brought that down and made it one level, which really gives you these kind of large expansive views out when you're in the plaza and helps to open up the sense of space within it. I mentioned making the blue a stronger element to help with circulation and wayfinding, and you can see it here as it draws you in up and through the stairs, which is a change from 60%. And then as noted, we work with Romson to really think about that art integration and where we pull it around the architectural element and how it can really contribute to a sense of welcoming an entry at each side of the station. If you go to the next slide, and at 60%, when we met with the Design Commission and then we met with the subcommittee, there was a lot of discussion about the civic nature of the station itself and how we could articulate that a little stronger. And so we did a lot of moves here. So the first one was really to look at the pedestrian level and think about the pedestrian experience at the street level. We cleaned up some of the elements at the pedestrian level and really started to use darker materials. We wanted it to recede. We wanted the station architecture to recede and really highlight the art and the vegetation down at that level. As I mentioned, we used the blue in a different way. So the blue is confined to the elevator cores, and then it moves you up and through the stairs all the way up to the platform level. And then, we started to look at the platform level and the curtain wall and the metal panels, and we cleaned them up. We took some of the color off of them, really to give a strong expression to the windscreen up at the upper level and to enhance that sense of transparency there. We think what this does is it really highlights that vertical and accentuates the vertical nature of the station and creates kind of a different experience when you're there within the plaza as well as when you step away and see it from afar, and really highlights its place along the kind of the larger Linwood Link kind of network of stations. I do want to point out that for those that are in the room, the elevation that's at the top of the slide or left in the room is along Fifth Avenue, and so that's where a lot of Romson's art comes into play. That's where the pedestrians are approaching the station. The view that you all have on the right side is the view that you would get as you're moving down the I-5 corridor. It's also the elevation that's at the bottom of the slide. So if you go to the next slide, and I think Clennell and I are going to pop up here, and Clennell's going to talk a little bit about the materials. I'll help you hold these, but we did want to talk about them again in terms of elements of continuity, and then the unique elements that are distinctive in the station. So,
yeah, the 35 materials on this screen are limited to the ground plane. So I can grab that one. So they're more textured and they're consistent at all Sound Transit stations, and they help with wayfinding from the plaza to the platform. So there's texture there. The next material is the metal panel.
I don't know if people on this.
Oh yeah, thanks for reminding me.
A lot.
Yeah. So this material is rib, and it's at the elevator entries. This granite paper is found throughout the plaza, and it leads you to the stairs and other vertical transportation elements and guides you along the platform. What Assam is holding indicates fair paid zones and the edge of platform.
This is a part of architecture school that they don't tell you about.
Yeah.
Did you include a plan of the material layout in the presentation? Sorry.
Yeah, there's a platform plan that allows you to see kind of where those different textures are.
Okay.
This metal panel here is a lighter silver color, and that's used with the other Linwood Link extension stations. It's found in elevation at the platform level, but more importantly at the roof. It contributes to the station's heat island reduction and lead efforts.
So if you can imagine the metal panel, the curtain wall, and then of course the dominant concrete that goes along, you guys can see it now when you drive along I-5, that guideway is already being built, right? So that concrete is a big part of the expression.
And this Washington gray paint sample, it's just used at exposed steel that just prevents corrosion and rust. The last finish here is a fractured thin, which is on the retaining wall along I-5, which encourages planting, which you saw earlier on the other elevation, but you can see in the printed elevation here with that binding cement going up that wall. On the next slide, you'll see down arrow. Yeah, thank you. Elements of distinction, so that elements that are particular or unique to the station itself. The first being the use of translucent glass. It's mainly used at the top level to create a lighter second story, but as a side platform station, there's glazing at the stair enclosure and the platform enclosure, providing continuous protection from the elements. In contrast, at the plaza level, we have a lot more darker finishes. So we have They're just samples. All right. So we have this darker metal panel finish, which in contrast with the lighter metal panel finish that we saw earlier. And that's used at the stair enclosure and the escalator enclosure. At the eye level, we introduced this perforated pattern, which increases visibility at the stair for patients coming into the station. And then that perf pattern follows the escalator slope. So it kind of showcases circulation throughout the station. I can show that pattern.
Can you show us what the pattern is on the
Yeah.
bottom here? I know they will be able to see.
Yeah, no problem.
And maybe we can scroll.
So the perf pattern, which is, this is a mock-up of that pattern. The panel would actually be 2 times this width. And that's
But the openings are to scale.
correct. Mhm. That's here. So the upper portion of the stair enclosure. And then at the escalator, we would have it following this line here. So pretty much following eye level at the escalator. And then the stair, it's also reflected on the other side, so it's just mirrored.
So the lighter gray in the drawing.
Correct, yeah. It's more of a, yeah, just right there.
And I should note that perf patterns are used all along the corridor,
Correct.
but they're different as you go to the different sections. And so it's kind of an interesting material for us because we can use it and be really distinctive about the stations, but also kind of use a similar vocabulary, similar to the use of color and use of some.
And what's the thickness of that separated?
I'm not totally clear on the gauge. It's thicker than this, and it's bent aluminum panel. If I can get back to you guys. And just before we move on to this slide, I wanted to share the darker finish of the CMU block. It kind of complements the darker metal panel color. That's what this looks like. And then as far as other elements of distinction, we also included landscape and art. So on this slide, you just see a few samplings of the
CMU was sorry.
Oh yeah, the CMU. Yeah, thanks. The CMU is just located at the plaza level at the center, back of house space. So that kind of just recedes under the shadow of the guideway.
But then as you approach that piece from the pedestrian side, it's wrapped in Romson's art. So, and then his art, I believe, is on a series of tiles that will be placed there. So they're kind of painted tiles that cover it and capture his art. And that's what you'll see from the Fifth Avenue side. On the I-5 side, it'll really be in shadow and it'll really recede back in there. You probably won't even really notice.
Right. So yeah, that CMU on the pedestrian side or from Fifth Avenue will be cladded in this porcelain enamel. This is a mock-up, but it's the same material that would be facing Fifth Avenue. So starting with the artist palette, they're very bold colors, and Romson chose those colors to complement the station's blue color. As you'll note, it's still kind of being refined, but this has a bold impact, as you noted or saw in his other artworks. And then landscape is limited to the plaza level, and it's just a few of the landscape elements that are native and climately adapted to Seattle, and provide seasonal interest throughout the year. And Lena will speak to that a little bit more later in the presentation.
And just like Romson, Lena was really thinking about color as she selected that landscape palette as well. And so, you know, the intent is that they all play together, even though the landscape is more dynamic, obviously.
So is anything really black, or is the solid black we're seeing just indicative of something?
Where are you seeing solid black? I'm sorry.
The black areas.
Here is, are you talking about this black area or this black
No,
area?
between the elevators. Keep going.
In the middle, I think.
Oh, here.
Yeah, there's actually a black rectangle that you have.
Keep going
where
left.
your elbow is.
Above the answer.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you. That's the dark metal panel, and yeah, it's farther in, so it's just darker in shadow, but that's concealing all the
But it
conduit.
doesn't tie to the black here, actually.
Right, no, it doesn't. Yeah, we're speaking of this area here.
Yeah, it's really these
In shadow.
kind of dark colors, and then the thought is they're in shadow. So these are the kind of the hues that.
Yeah.
Which is a little different than what we showed before, because before we were bringing the lighter grays down, so everything was kind of the same, and but no pure blacks.
Right.
And we'll be looking at these in a lot more detail as we continue the presentation.
Yeah. You go ahead the bottom button.
You bring up big drawings to look at, so I'm sure.
Of course.
I'm going to keep moving us along. Do you want to run?
Yeah. So supporting a great ride is fundamental to Sound Transit's mission. This means that creating a simple, seamless, and intuitive passenger journey and improving physical and psychological safety for every passenger in stations and on all buses and trains. Sound Transit station plazas reflect this focus on passenger experience and are designed to be welcoming, safe, and accommodating for people. Architectural detailing, landscape, and artwork work together to provide delight to those who pass through, as well as those who choose to stop and stay for a while. The photo above is from the U District station and provides a good example of one of our successful station plazas, incorporating seating, weather protection, wayfinding signage, artwork, landscape plantings, and bike storage, and is reflective of the quality of design that we expect to see in the Northeast 130th station as well. Next slide, please. Our design process considers a variety of passenger perspectives in order to ensure that our design solutions are equitable and based in universal design. For this project, we would like to present the design experience through the lens of various passenger personas who are representative of some of the passengers that could be using this station.
So our first persona is Kala. And if you could imagine a high school student coming from Ingram to meet up with their friends, traveling by bike to the station. I kind of like this persona because I have a son who takes his bike to the station all the time, so kind of meaningful. But we talked a lot about Ingram. Ingram's within a 10-minute bike shed of the station. And this slide shows proposed access improvement projects that SDOT had in the station area, which we wanted to be forward compatible with. The improvements include connections along 5th to the Shoreline South 148th Street station. And it should be noted that many of these connections are not exclusively for bike access. Next slide. At the station itself, there are a number of locations for Kala and friends to park their bikes, either in long-term or short-term bike racks that are located, as you can see here, both on the south, which is on the left side of the screen, the north on the right side of the screen, and the central plazas that we have at the station. Coming from Ingram, it's likely that Kala would go to the South Plaza. That's where we expect about 80% of our ridership to go. The South Plaza artwork, though similar in color palette and scale to the artwork throughout the station, it'll really be unique to this location. And we expect that the artwork will provide a supplemental element of wayfinding for the riders. Ronson is developing bold images that connect back to the cultural landscape and the sense of place that we have around the station. We're calling these glyphs, and these glyphs pictured here are representative of symbols that will make their way onto the final design of the station. The dragonfly, which is Washington State's state insect, but it also talks to the artwork that's happening, that is in place at Northgate Station. The boats themselves represent the water flows through the neighborhood. You could imagine the flow of Sound Transit through the neighborhood, but it's really representative of movement throughout the neighborhoods. And then representations of the landscape and the greenery, talking back to kind of the cultural landscape around the station and throughout the neighborhoods. If you go to the next slide, and then his artwork at the South Plaza will also include one of the guideway columns, which he'll be painting up at the Capitol. This glyph, I really like this one. It's an abstraction of the black cap raspberry, which, as we mentioned earlier, is kind of the Bitter Lake is a derivative from the Coast Salish, well, not from the word itself, but it references back to those black-cap raspberries that were there historically. And you could imagine these columns becoming an icon or a landmark for CALA to meet their friends at. If you go to the next slide. So as CALA and friends enter the plaza, we talked a little bit about this, but Romson's artwork creates that sense of arrival and welcomes them in. The Creek blue metal panels are emphasized to create a sense of movement and wayfinding, and we touched a little bit on those silver perforated metal panels, which really provide a moment or a place where CALA and friends can sit in the plaza and watch people as they move up and down to the guideway. In the next slide, you can see here in the plaza all of the vegetation that we're thinking about, and CALA might notice the vegetation might even smell a vanilla scent from the adjacent plants, and they would be surrounded by shade-loving plants that provide seasonal interest, a mixture of native plants that speak to the cultural history of the place. We're thinking about things like sword ferns, salal, vine maples, Oregon grape. And adjacent to that is the city streetscape mix, which features an alley of Japanese stewardias. As you all know, their leaves change to kind of a vibrant, bright orange and red in the autumn, and a lovely white flower in the warmer times of the year. And we really think that's a great complement to the bold colors that Romson's using in his artwork, the reds and whites and blacks. Go to the next slide. The plaza also incorporates a number of functional, standard, and custom furnishings. These are standard furnishing elements of continuity that you would see all along the network, but really important for creating a sense of place at the plaza. They would include short and long-term bike parking, which we mentioned, protected bollards and lighting, but also a place for CALA and friends to sit. And if you go to the next slide, you guys were asking about the platform level. This is a plan that shows the platform level, a kind of a diagram of how the wayfinding materials are coming together, really intended to bring CALA and friends from the south, but really all riders from either side converging at kind of a wayfinding element that's at the center of the platform that everybody could come to. And if you go to the next slide, as mentioned, this is an infill station, which means that it's a side platform. And it's really, as we started to look at it, we really wanted it to feel open and transparent. We worked hard on that. The station canopy and the windscreen are continuous because it sometimes rains. Sometimes we think it's going to snow in Seattle. And, you know, we really tried to keep it kind of very clean and organized with LED lights. All of the elements, the various elements are tucked away. And you could really imagine CALA and friends standing up here looking out at the city as they wait for their train. Go to the next slide.
The second person that will take us through the station today, through their unique perspective and itinerary, is Nico. Nico is a person using a wheelchair who rides Link regularly to travel to Seattle. He arrives via Access paratransit bus at the Central Plaza area. So various improvements will be made in the station area to address accessibility. This includes not only paratransit pull-out, but completing accessible sidewalks, crossings and curbs, and curb ramps on the east side of Fifth Avenue. When going in and around the station, Nico can take any of the accessible routes. Safer pedestrian access across Northeast 130th and across the ADA accessible crossing on Fifth Avenue Northeast to the south, as well as the accessible ramp to the north of the station. Today, Nico is getting dropped off at the center of the station at the paratransit bus stop. Nico's access bus arrives at the Central Plaza on the west side of Fifth Avenue. This allows them to exit the bus directly at the plaza area without having to cross the street. It's a pleasant morning, Nico gets off the paratransit vehicle. As he does, he's greeted by lush landscaping around the edges of the curb and trees reminding him of the greenery around the neighboring area surrounding the station. The porcelain tile artwork, the central plaza that covers the central utility building, beacons him to the station's central area. As Nico approaches, he gets a closer look at the plaza art. This artwork is integral to the scale and massing of the building form and has been integrated into the building envelope. The scale is simultaneously iconic and detailed. One of the artwork's goal is for passengers to experience it differently each time they pass through the station. In thinking through Nico's experience and people like Nico, as a transit rider at the station, Romson has actually developed a glyph that will represent people using wheelchairs like Nico, which you can see on the bottom left here. I wanted to include this because this glyph will eventually make its way into the design, and that it really gives us a good idea of the artist's thought process around design development and his intention to promote inclusivity and representation through his imagery throughout the artwork all around the station. Nico heads toward the ticket vending machines to refill his Orca card in the south entrance lobby. The blue color supports clear wayfinding and ties the vertical circulation elements together visually. As Nico makes his way to the elevator, his mood is further lifted by the color that is guiding him toward the platforms. He smiles as he remembers participating to the survey that helped decide this very color as he responded to the open house public outreach back in 2020. Finally, a look at the central plaza landscape where the tactile paving reinforces accessibility and safety as well as wayfinding. The site furnishings and ground plane patterns and finishes are appreciated as elements of continuity, allowing Nico to have a smooth and reliable experience riding his wheelchair across the station. A simple hardscape pattern with neutral colors allows the landscape and the artwork to shine as the elements of distinction as well. In the fall, the red leaves of the Stuartia trees lining the sidewalk match the red leaves of afterburner tupelo trees lining the other side of Fifth Avenue. Boulders follow the sinuous form of planting along the sidewalk and are also placed strategically onto the plaza. The colors of the trees are reminiscent of the color palette chosen by the artists. The trio of boulders, you can see on the lower left here, near the two benches and the bike lockers, loosely demarcated gathering place. The boulders flanking the seat wall, retaining walls adjacent to the sidewalk, anchor this feature in place and resemble a stream riffle. As he progresses through the station, Nico finds his path unencumbered and is feeling safe in his home station.
Now let's follow the persona of Gray and Ellison and persona of Remy. Gray and Ellison are headed to the airport. They arrive at the station by car at the North Drop-Off area on a very rainy day. Remy is a local author who works from home. She often walks to the station plaza as a nearby public space. Gray and Ellison's driver is able to pull up Fifth Avenue into the designated short-term loading zone at the north. This pickup and drop-off loop is a one-way turnaround for personal and rideshare vehicles. This design minimizes interactions between cars and pedestrians and eliminates the need for street crossings. As Gray and Ellison arrive at the north drop-off loop, they appreciate the surrounding vine maples and cedars. They look to the lush planting on their left and are curious about the bioretention pond. It looks like it's made of burritos. This project takes advantage of grade change and opportunities to utilize stormwater infrastructure. As you look on the picture on the middle right, you'll see the detail of the burritos. These are actually a type of mechanically stabilized earth. Soil is wrapped with geotextiles and geogrids to create organic retaining walls. These are proposed at the northern end of the planting area where you can see that pond-like shape. This stormwater feature was a coordinated effort with the drainage team where we were able to do something unique. We were inspired by the nearby Thornton Creek Water Quality Channel project. There's a precedent photo on the bottom right. And over time, as the landscape matures, these burritos will become fully vegetated and you won't really be able to see them anymore. Vine maples are sprinkled out throughout this planter. Their leaves in the fall will transition to warm tones, matching the colors of the other trees on the site. In general, this planting palette provides many shades of greens with accents of whites and yellows during the warm season and a bold red accent of red from all the trees in the fall. In this area, you'll be able to see the bright red stems of the red twig dogwood. You can also see from this graphic how the rushes and sedges are planted in a sinuous form to mimic the appearance of a flowing stream. This design continues to the bioretention planter at the North Plaza. Next slide. It's a rainy Seattle day. Not like today. It was actually really nice today. And Gray and Ellison are relieved that the guideway can be their umbrella as they leave their car and walk towards the station. Looking at this rendering, you can see how the guideway creates a covered route to the main entry to the north lobby. The North Plaza will feature many pedestrian amenities and an artful stormwater feature. The artwork will be similar to the south facade with specific glyphs used to support wayfinding and differentiate north from south. In this rendering, you can see how the architecture, specifically on the left, the facade of the stair enclosure, how it provides a foundation for the art, landscape feature, and water route. All of these elements of distinction work together and generally would not be able to exist without one another. Next slide. Gray and Ellison approach the station entry. They choose to take the ramp instead of the stairs. The stairs and ramp were designed to share common decision points at the top and bottom, reinforcing equity of access at the station. If they find that the ramp or stairs are too crowded, they can also walk further east along the sidewalk and access the platform that way. Next slide. As Gray and Ellison walk up the ramp, they notice how the bioretention planter is animated by the overhead storm drainage. Gray is reminded that runoff from the rain flows from the structures and pavement to the creek. Rainwater is collected from the guideway to the downspout and flows through the planter, which follows the downhill grade to the north. Water will collect at various levels of the planter as it infiltrates. Functionally, this design reduces the load on nearby stormwater infrastructure and offsets the grade change. The sidewalk side is higher than the bike rack side by about 3 feet, so that's quite the drop. In addition to functional and sustainable, it is also artful design in that it is beautiful and engaging. Next slide. The visual aspect of this design educates, delights, and enlightens. It celebrates rainwater's resource value. There is an aesthetic and auditory richness in the use of the stepped funnel, the basin and scupper to reveal the stormwater and have it cool and fall and splash through these different planes. The placement of boulders provide visual contrast against the planting and at the same time works in harmony with it to provide that naturalistic feel at a human scale. The planting design for the site in general have a similar rhythm in the way they are planted in clusters. Overflow storm structures within the planter prevent excessive flooding during storm events, large storm events. Now, what happens if we keep getting these really dry summers and less rain? Permanent irrigation has been designed for this area. The plants will still grow and can look nice like in this graphic. Most plants proposed for this project are drought tolerant or drought tolerant once established. Specifically in this planter, the sedge, the spirea, the sword fern, they're all at least drought tolerant once established. And the Quartz Creek soft rush prefers more soil to grow, but it is reportedly more tolerant of less moisture soils than other brushes. Next slide. Similar to the South Plaza entry, there are numerous site furnishings. A custom bench and Sound Transit standard lean rails are provided for people waiting for their ride. Plenty of bike parking is available and also space for future ones as shown in the ghosted dash line. Next slide. The north lobby opens up to the central plaza, which provides both passage to the platform level as well as a public gathering space. Here, Gray and Ellison want to take a break and walk to the larger L-shaped bench and use the armrest to help them settle into the seat. They see Remy sitting in her favorite spot next to the trio of boulders. She usually walks to the station, and she enjoys people watching and uses time in public space to observe behavior and gain inspiration for her writing. This rendering is a good example of the advantages of keeping a simple paving pattern. A simple paving pattern is valuable. It's easy for people to understand. It contrasts to the various textures and colors being employed on the vertical surfaces as elements of distinction. As Osama and Lucille mentioned earlier, this repetition of the blue color on the architectural elements reinforce legibility to key points at the station. You can see here, there's on the middle, the ticket vending kiosk, the signs to the escalators and to the elevators. This also keeps the tactile wayfinding pavers distinct from the plaza paving. This supports accessibility and universal design. Having too many overlapping textures and features can make elements get lost among one another and lose the contrast that reinforces that legibility. You can also see that there's flexible seating, and as in you can choose where to sit in the shade, in the sun, with a group, or more isolated, and also seating with armrests like the one Gray and Ellison used, adding on to the equity of this space. Next slide. There are many ways to access this station by foot from the adjacent neighborhoods. As you can see here from the graphic, from the Bitter Lake Urban Village, it's a 21-minute walk. From the Lake City Urban Village, it's a 27-minute walk, and about 2 miles from the Jackson Street Trail, Jackson Park Trail. In this phase of design, a second crosswalk was added to the north side. This was funded by station access area funds and was not required. This improves the passenger experience by creating another accessible pedestrian route, and it provides a direct connection to the Jackson Park Trail. Next slide. Remy decides to take a joyride on the light rail to find more inspiration for her writing and goes to the ticket vending kiosk. She notices an interpretive sign about sustainability. This is the new standard Sound Transit graphic format for interpretive signage and will be located at the North Kiosk. Northeast 130 Station is one of the first regional transit projects pursuing the LEED transit rating system in the U.S., and it will be LEED Gold certified. This rating system has a focus on equity and accessibility. Some sustainability features include light-colored surfaces that keep the station cool, ultra water efficient landscaping and plumbing features, and energy efficient light fixtures that use LED lamps. Next slide.
And finally, we come to our fifth persona, Noor. Noor lives in North Seattle and drives daily on the I-5 to commute to her job in Everett. She's very excited that the light rail will eventually reach Everett so that she has improved transit options for her commute. This allows us to consider the station design from the platform and the I-5 corridor and how travelers like Noor will experience the station. Next slide. As we've looked at on the big elevation views that are on the wall, on the I-5 side, the station's massing and use of color are intended to emphasize the linear nature of transit through strong horizontal expression. The platform elements are lighter in tone, and the vertical circulations emphasized through the use of the blue color. Ground level structures have darker finishes in order to make them recede visually. Since the last presentation, the use of color at the platform level exterior has been updated, as Osama described, to reinforce the horizontality of the elevated platform. Noor enjoys watching the trains move swiftly along the guideway, often much faster than the I-5 track. Next slide. Noor is very excited to watch the progress of the construction as the infrastructure work for the station is completed. Already the shape and scale of the platform are apparent, and it is clear that the Northeast 130 Station will be a prominent civic landmark along the I-5 corridor. The photograph that you see in the lower right there is actual Google photo taken from the I-5. It's actually progressed further than that, but you can see already the scale of the station platform itself as it's under construction and its relationship to the highway. Next slide. The landscape treatment along the I-5 retaining wall includes small trees, native vegetation, and vines. This will provide screening and will soften the hard surfaces of the wall, and the plantings are complementary to the plantings used throughout the station. Noor enjoys the seasonal color changes of the plantings, which are especially brilliant in the spring and fall. The colors of the flowers and foliage will complement the colors used in the artwork and architectural finishes. The retaining wall will be finished in a fractured fin finish, which also complements the patterns and sense of rhythm expressed in the station's architectural finishes. This finish is consistent with washed-out wall textures used along the I-5 corridor. Next slide. And then finally, we wanted to finish with a look at the off-ramp and street improvements that were made as a part of the station construction. The street improvements have been the subject of years of coordination with SDOT, WashDOT, and King County Metro and other authorities. Some street and intersection improvements are planned as a part of the station construction. Others are allowances for improvements by others. So just to walk through these from the left, you can see that the Fifth Avenue off-ramp reconfiguration from the I-5 northbound onto Fifth Avenue includes a 10-foot allowance for future bike facility there. The intersection of 130th and 5th will be completely reconfigured. There will be bus stops added at the northeast and southwest corners, including King County Metro bus shelters, to allow for passengers to board going either in east or west directions. Along Fifth Avenue, along the east side, there'll be a raised bike path, and which transitions to a shared use path at the north end of the station and goes all the way up to the 145th roundabout. As Lena mentioned, we also have added 2 new mid-block crossings, which were not required to be there, but increase the pedestrian safety and accessibility for passengers getting to the station. Next slide. And finally, we just wanted to conclude with a quick look at the actual station completion schedule, which is complex due to the different construction packages. So as discussed earlier, the station schedule was accelerated and the design broken into packages to allow completion of as much of the station infrastructure as possible prior to electrification of the Linwood Link extension, which opens in 2024. The construction that I showed the photo of currently underway is a part of what's referred to as the C2 package, which this commission previously reviewed, which consists of the primary structural elements of the station, such as the platform and canopy. The current design covers the C3 package, which comprises all of the station finishes and roadway improvements. This package is planned to be publicly bid early next year, with construction continuing through project completion by 2026. Some transit plans continue public outreach to inform the community about progress during construction starting early next year, as well as impacts to items such as traffic diversions. So that concludes our design presentation. I just wanted to thank the commission for their time, and also wanted to thank you for the previous comments that you've provided in the previous reviews that we've had. They've really helped us focus our design work over the last 8 months and hopefully deliver a really good station experience. So we'll turn it over to any questions and comments at this point.
Thank you. Let's see, do we have any city representatives that?
We do have a few people from the city who are attending. We have a number of people who are in as a call-in user. We've had some challenges getting people into the meeting who should have been registered, and so WebEx, right? So what I think we should do is maybe see if there are any people online first that are from a city agency. If you can hear us and you can raise your hand, that would be helpful, and we can recognize you then. If we can circle back as well to make sure that anyone who raised their hand got recognized as we shift into Commissioner question. Yeah, I'm not seeing anybody online right now.
User 18.
User 18. I think you were unmuted, user 18. Could you, since we don't have you, we have you listed online as call-in user 18. If you could identify yourself, and then we allow 2 minutes for public comment.
This is Brian Masick from King County Metro. I'm not sure if I'm user 18, but can I go ahead and talk?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, this is weird on the phone. This is Brian Masick from King County Metro. I'm Metro's lead integration planner on the Linwood Link project, including 130th Street Station. And I just wanted to provide some comments saying that Metro has really appreciated Sound Transit's integration with Metro, working with us at every design phase of this project to ensure a seamless transfer experience between Metro buses and Sound Transit Link Light Rail. As shown on one of the slides, we've worked closely with them on the street improvements and their SIP permit to ensure bus stops are provided east-west on 130th Street. We're planning a frequent transit route on that street to coincide with the opening of the station. And Sound Transit's worked with us to make sure transit riders have a great waiting experience and then an easy walking path to and from the station. So just wanted to let the commission know that we've had a great relationship working with them, and we believe we're going to have a great transit integration experience in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Anyone else attending virtually that wanted to make public comment? I'm going to lower your, did we lower your hand?
It looks like Tammy Frederick has her hand raised, but she's an attendee.
Tammy, we're going to,
Yeah, Tammy.
we're going to make you a, Juliet, could you make Tammy Frederick a presenter? Or unmute her?
Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Tammy.
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to let you all know that Sound Transit's been working diligently with us on their street improvement permit, and they have incorporated all of the items that we've talked about over the years at designing this project. And if you have any questions, just let me know.
Thanks, Tammy. Patrice, I think did you raise your hand?
I tried to.
My hand now. Yeah, thanks.
Did I send help?
We just muted you.
Yeah, I can give you a quick
About our planning work around the 130th station. I think the last time we came to talk, we gave an update to the commission. We had not yet begun our environmental review process. So that's where we are now. We are going through a very detailed environmental review. It's also being done as part of our comprehensive plan update. So looking at sort of context areas as well as the changes we might look at around the station. And one of the alternatives that we'll be studying does include designating that area as an urban village at densities which are similar to the densities that you would see around the Roosevelt Light Rail Station now. So our schedule for completing that work is where we've done our scoping. We'll be issuing a draft environmental impact statement in the spring of 2023 and a final environmental impact statement in the spring of 2024. And hopefully bringing forward zoning legislation for council to consider in the fall of 2024. And happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Patrice. Are there any other individuals who are attending virtually with public comment? We will check back with you after commissioner questions. And were we going to start in the room and then go virtual? That's what we decided. Let me try that. I got a little distracted over there earlier. Let me go ahead and start clockwise with Amalia.
Oh, awesome. So I have a couple questions. One, I'm in here, this wall, so the back wall of, I don't know the architectural term for this structure. It looks like on the plan,
there are gates on either side of it. And so I just wanted to confirm, it looks like it's gonna be lit on this plan. And I was just wondering, so when you talked a little bit about being able to see the light rail station as you're traveling over, and some of the views are gonna be not available to people, but I was just wondering if that's gonna be, like, if you could talk a little bit about the illumination of this piece, and is there any opportunity, I guess what I'm getting at is to like integrate some of those art elements that you talked, either like the dragonflies or something, to just connect even at points on these kind of blank facades, any elements of the art, or has there been any discussion about that?
Well, I think a number of people might want to jump in here. I think I'm speaking correctly, and correct me, Cornell, if I'm wrong, but that it's not currently thought to be really illuminated from an architectural standpoint on that wall. We're trying to de-emphasize that wall again to have it. That was the idea of the dark color. I think to the comment about bringing the artwork, but can we illuminate it? The answer is, I believe, there's infrastructure there. We have lighting underneath the guideway that is primarily used for, the pedestrian experience as they come into the station. That back edge, so there's a back walkway back there that kind of overhangs a little bit, and that is the reason those doors are there is because only Sound Transit folks go back there. So the lighting back there is really what I would call housekeeping lighting. But in terms of the artwork, I think, Lucille can talk more to the budget that we have and the constraints around how much artwork we have and where it's going.
I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that. Typically, when we develop artwork, we're thinking of it as being ambiently lit, which means that especially in this situation where the artwork is fully integrated in the architectural design, there is no reason to think of it as a gallery artwork that would need lighting to come to life. So this is typically how we proceed with our development. We don't usually have.
So, sorry, so I just meant there is going to be light and other things that are going to draw the eye to this area. And so if my eye is drawn to this area, this is a very simple blank facade. And so I was just wondering, I didn't mean for the art to be illuminated. I just meant that if you look at this side compared to the other side, are there any opportunities to bring in art elements at all, even little snippets to like entice people to and understand you're gonna like be exposed to when you come around the other side?
Let me just talk a little bit about the way we've been thinking about it architecturally on that side. So as I mentioned, we can. Can that be done? Yes, that's it. But in terms of what we've been trying to do architecturally is, again, trying to get those elements to recede. We think the elevations are slightly deceiving because, when you're on I-5, you're down low, kind of looking up. So the elevations maybe make, in my opinion, I'll just talk to myself. I think that wall seems a little more prominent in the elevation than it would be from most views. You would get far away views of that. And so I think we felt that the art was more impactful where it was close, where you could get close to it and touch it. Just the nature of Romson's work, and he's been dictating where the art goes. I mean, we've kind of given him the facades and let him come back to us with ideas of where he thinks there would be more impact. He selected that column, for instance, that we showed. I hear what you're saying. I think, however, our approach architecturally has been to de-emphasize it. And so that's what we
Just to be clear, there's no pedestrian circulation on that side.
There's no pedestrian circulation back there. You can't get back there unless you work for Sound Transit. You have to go through an access controlled gateway.
And I think what I was thinking really is about not necessarily people on I-5, but people traversing, either walking, biking, or driving, or being on transit on 130th. And being able to see the station off in the distance. And that elevation to me seems like you can see this. And I understand the blue columns are there, but it feels like there's there could have been opportunity to incorporate something different. Cause then on the other side, you're like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah,
So,
thank you. No, understood.
that
So,
was where my question came from.
If I can just add one thing, one other constraint that we're working with is a WashDOT policy, that there not be any driver distraction on the I-5 side. So they prefer not to see anything colorful or visually distracting on that side.
Unless it's adjacent to other areas of the. So my last question is around circulation. I just have a couple questions. So you mentioned paratransit is one of the profiles if someone would be arriving by paratransit. And I just want to confirm paratransit, if you could go to a site map circulation. So a paratransit driver, because Fifth Avenue is going to remain northbound only. So a paratransit driver to access drop-off, the drop-off zone identified would have to actually enter into the drop-off parking lot area and turn around before they were able to drop off anyone in the load zone?
Yes.
Okay, and then has the city, and maybe this is a question for SDOT, right now there's 2 left turn lanes plus a straight lane. Has there been any discussion about reducing the crossing of the south leg of the intersection at Fifth? This is in relation to the number of boarding and alightings and the relationship to the bus. That southwest corner of the intersection at Fifth and 130th is going to be a major bus stop, and so I was just curious if that leg has the other one. Yeah, no, yes, that one. Has there been any discussion about shortening that? And basically what I'm thinking is like, could you combine a straightaway, like you have 1 left turn and then 1 left turn plus straight? Is there any discussions with that in SDOT?
I know that we do have John Laser and Tammy Frederick on the call from SDOT.
Yeah, I can speak to that.
Yes.
Yeah, we did look at that, and due to the I-5 off ramp, we can't eliminate the second turn because it'll back up on I-5. But we have shortened that, made the island there much larger than it used to be, and obviously got rid of a whole lane of traffic. So it has been reduced quite a bit, but we can't reduce it anymore.
Okay, and then last question. There was the parking lot that's used for staging right now. Is that coming back on as a parking lot to the north?
No, that's not the current plan.
Okay. What is that gonna be, just restored?
Be restored. It'll be used as staging for this particular project construction, and then restored in accordance with county's requirements or that side of the washout and storm.
Okay, so does the King County person, is that gonna be restored as vegetation or is that gonna be restored as parking?
I don't know that decision's been made.
And that would be a King County decision?
Correct.
Okay, thanks, I'm done.
We do have Brian Masick again on the line. If Brian, if you have an answer to that.
This is John Laser. I'm going to jump in also. It's actually WashDOT right-of-way. And we discussed with both WashDOT and King County, they do not have intentions to reopen it as a park and ride lot or a lot serving the light rail service, in part because it's just too small. Like it really wouldn't, it'd probably create more problems than it would solve. But the future use of that lot is not determined yet. So it's WashDOT's property. King County may have a role in operating it as some supporting facility in the future, but right now there's no plans for that other than I think there's an existing lease for a cell tower. But other than that, it would just be for maintenance access.
This is Brian Masick. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, I'll just add on to what John said. He's correct. It's owned by WashDOT, operated and maintained by Metro previously as a park and ride lot. Our intent, our original idea was to convert it to sort of like a mini fleet hub where we could have access vans and van pools come and park there. And then with an eye towards the future of actually people could drive their van pool vans to the station and park there or take access there, kind of TBD, but we don't have funding for that right now. So we're still, I think, working with WashDOT to try to figure out what we can do there. But as John mentioned, there's no formal plan yet.
Well, I want to add on, even though there's no formal plan, we do have planting planned there. There's green space, so we'll have some ground covers and like 7 trees there.
Thanks, Brian.
I don't have any.
I'll waive clarifying questions as well. Okay, I have a couple, getting really specific, but on the benches that you've been showing that are a standard product that appears to be a precast element with the slope. What is the scale of those with the armrest? It looks to me like it's kind of an awkward size that would almost only fit one person on those.
Yeah, those ones would only fit maybe 1 or 2 people, and then the L bench is large and could fit 2 or 3.
Okay, so maybe 2 people between those armrests? Yeah. Do you know the dimension?
I can
be 2 really tiny people. 2 of me maybe. Cozy. And then on the custom place concrete in the plaza, I see there's a different scale of jointing when you're in more of like the sidewalk world as opposed to the plaza, but what is the finish you're thinking of the concrete?
The concrete for the plaza is an integral color. It'll be sandstone, and that was shown in one of the elements of continuity slide. And then for the sidewalk side, which the smaller scoring, that's just the standard City of Seattle grade concrete.
Yeah. Great, thank you for clarifying that. On the art slide, it showed the elements of the structures that would have art, but there was a standalone dot, and I'm sorry if I missed that, but I was wondering what that, at the South Plaza, there was like a red dot there.
That is the gangway column.
Oh, that's the gangway column.
That would host a
okay.
stencil page.
Okay.
With the bitter light.
Yep. Great. So it would really be the first one if you were arriving at that corner and you would see that as
correct.
Yeah, it's kind of pulled away from the plaza.
Yeah. And just so I understand, I know Molly was talking about this, but you did the various scenarios played out on different ways of arriving, but there wasn't a full scenario of if you were arriving by a typical Metro bus as opposed to the paratransit. So I think that there's going to be a station on the northeast and south, or there's a stop at the northeast and southwest corners. And is there, like, what infrastructure is going in there in terms of shelter or things
There
like
will be
that?
standard King County Metro shelters in both of those locations. And the people would access the station via the pedestrian crosswalks from those corners to the station plaza. That's why we feel the majority of passengers will be arriving at that South Plaza either by bike or by bus.
Okay.
Is there a rapid rail? I don't think there is a rapid rail stop.
I don't believe so. Brian Masick, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Catherine had a lot more personas, which is.
I know, I'm sure it could go on and on.
We can leave that as a philosophical. Did you have any other questions?
Yeah, just one quick question. Early in the presentation, you mentioned there was a station access allowance of 4.9 million that would be dedicated to east-west corridor improvements. Can you just clarify a little bit more how that works and the timing of that?
That's a great question. I'm going to ask if Alex Creek is on the line. If you could speak to the timing of that, or Randy, maybe you're familiar with the timing of those investments.
Alex is smarter than I am when it comes to that, but I can take a crack at it if he's not on the line.
I'm not sure.
Alex may be in as a call-in user.
You could raise your hand, Alex, if you're there. If not, then maybe Randy can take your crack at it.
Give him half a heartbeat here. Okay, that's all you get. Yeah, with respect to that access enhancement fund that's built into the ST3 projects, the idea behind it is to give the local area municipalities, I think this was mentioned in the presentation, an opportunity to expand in mobile access in collaboration with Sun Transit. The idea would be that the funding gets transferred in a timely enough fashion to allow those access improvements to be complete by the time the station opens. So that would be Q2 2026. There's some flexibility with that, but that's the original intent of the board's action, and putting those into the ST3 packages is to have that ready for the time.
Hey, John.
John just wants to correct what I've said.
No. I don't want to correct. I just want to add to it. Thank you. I just wanted to note that for the corridor project, 125th Roosevelt, Northeast 130th, our transit and mobility team and our project development team are working on a project that works on the entire corridor between Lake City and Howler Lake or Bitter Lake. And we've identified sort of seed money from our transit funds. The Sound Transit money would help contribute to that, and we've also secured a grant through PSRC for about another $5.5 million. So we have a total project that's probably in excess of $10 million. With the Sound Transit funds in particular, we're really focusing on improvements that ideally we could build before station opening, and those improvements that provide the most benefit to station access. And so we're looking at widening the sidewalk, working with WashDOT on potentially widening the sidewalk on the bridge across I-5, which is a real existing bottleneck. That's a very challenging piece, but something that we're working hard on. But again, we're looking at the Sound Transit funds contributing to and helping us leverage additional grant funding to do corridor-wide improvements that would support both the enhanced transit service that Brian Masick talked about in the corridor, but also pedestrian access from the Pinehurst community or the community west of I-5.
Great, thank you. Benita, I just wanted to circle back to your previous question. Brian said it texted me. So bus shelters, tech pylons with real-time arrival and orca readers will be the infrastructure that are provided at each of those bus stops.
And shifting to commissioners attending virtually, why don't we just do it in alphabetical order, starting with Elaine, then Elizabeth, and then finally Matt Hall. Elaine?
Thank you. I'll start with a more specific question. There's some bike parking on the south side of the building. I'm not sure what slide that shows on, but it looked to me like potentially it might be very difficult to, once bikes are parked in that area, to actually get a bike into that space. It just looked very tight in terms of how you might maneuver a bike perpendicularly to that stairwell. And then, you know, if there were thoughts about safety, it seemed to be like one of the areas on the site where there actually could be some limitations of visibility if somebody were walking down those stairs at night. And I don't know if you guys have discussed that or if you've done some studies to see that you can actually get the bikes in there, because it didn't really see dimensions on the plans, but.
Yeah, I can talk to them. Those are good comments. We have looked at it, and when we did put them in there, we did a lot of studies around the stairs and the various pieces to get everything in here. And so we did look at kind of what it would mean to maneuver bikes in and out of there. It is a little bit tight, but it's, you know, something that's definitely doable when bikes are there. So, but happy to provide more info if needed on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would look at Yeah, I would look at that again, just because, I mean, if you look at that image right there, you know, and maybe it's because you're looking at a perspective there of the bike, but it almost looks like it takes up the majority of that space perpendicularly. So as a bike rider, I'll advocate for a little more space. So anyway, but
And then you had a comment about safety. I don't know, Lena, if you want to talk about that
Oh, yeah,
too,
in terms
but
of safety, so it is very visible from the sidewalk side, since as mentioned earlier, that sidewalk side is 3 feet higher. So you could see into it pretty easily.
and didn't you look into a little bit like reducing the wall heights and really thinking about the vegetation heights that are in there?
Yeah, the wall height isn't too high, so you kind of see the perspective here. And I actually think in the updated design, there is more space. I'll have to look at the exact plan to see the dimensions. And then there will also be lighting there as well.
Yeah, so I think what we're saying is that diagram that we showed kind of misrepresents maybe a little bit the size of the bicycle parking units. We'll go back and double check, but I think that's what's going on. That's what you're seeing.
I think that was the older plan, actually, using the diagram.
And just to be clear, Lena, what's reflected in this perspective is more so the day one opening of bike racks, and then we'll add more in the future in the case that there's more bike needs.
Right. Yeah.
okay. My next question, Amalia started off with this question, and Osama, you talked about it a little bit, but I want to understand more about the art and how the art opportunity was scoped, because I think when I looked back at a prior proposal from I think the original proposal that we had, and I'm not sure. Oh, it was, you were showing some artwork by Tiffany Hammonds. It looked like it was sort of, you know, in the exact same places as the art that we're seeing now. And so I was wondering, was the opportunity sort of scoped as these are the walls that are available, or was it more of a clean slate where Sound Transit said, hey, here's our station. Where would you think about integrating art?
I'm happy to speak to that. So it's a little bit of both. So in deciding to hire an artist on a design-only contract, we've done a lot of coordination with the station architects on deciding what would be the most appropriate placement for the artist. Once the artist, Romson Bustillo, was hired and under contract, we've resumed those conversations with his approach in mind, and we've actually expanded the scope of the artwork that we had previously presented to you to include a location on the South Plaza column, and to wrap around inside the lobbies of the North and South entrance. Also, the ancillary wall location was not finalized previously, and we with the artist we've made final determination on what the fabrication method should be.
Yeah, so the ancillary wall, that's the one in the middle of the structure in the middle that Amalia was asking about, that we only have it on one side. So let me just talk about the process a little bit, because we did have some areas that were picked out, and because it's a design-only contract, that there were some thoughts about method of art, that it's 2D, how it would get applied. And but we worked with, we did have a lot of sessions with Romson to go through the station, and we did highlight a lot of areas where we thought it could be, but we wanted his feedback as well. And he did gravitate to those entry locations, I think, because they are pretty prominent as entry locations, but the tweaks were wrapping it in, making it more a little more integrated, I think, than what we were showing before. Before, I think we just had it applied on the outside at the plaza area. And then he's been thinking about, you know, what that means as you move through the building. He also worked with us as we thought about transparency at the stairs, which was a comment, I think, that came out of the subcommittee meeting with that you were at, Elaine, I believe. And so we worked with him on how the artwork might integrate with the perforations and where we would, you know, think about that. What the different colors would be, that all kind of came into play. So I think you're right. They are in a lot of the similar locations, but I do think Romson had a fair bit of ownership on deciding where he could put them and how the architectural materials also might respond to his approach to kind of integrating the art.
Did you have any discussions about whether or not the art and the transparent panels could blend together?
Absolutely. The artist was supplied with a sample of the perforated panels to start thinking through about ways to integrate the patterns into his artwork. I wanted to really be very clear that what we're showing in the renderings are very, very much preliminary designs, and that a lot of work will be performed into through community engagement work and through more coordination work with the station architects to really integrate the artwork. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that Romson's very interested, because he is a transit writer, he's very interested in wayfinding elements. And a lot of the designs will be guided and intended to really help writers know where they are and where to go.
And one final question on this, and I know we're going along probably on questions, but did you have any discussions about whether there should be art as an element of distinction in the platform area? So for riders that are going through, you know, through the corridor, maybe they're not even stopping, but there's this element, you know, that basically some of what you're reading from below also happens in the platform area.
That wasn't something that we really focused on, to be honest with you. We really did focus down at the pedestrian level. I think part of that was trying to think about some of the comments we also got the last time we were here and thinking about entry and welcoming. It's something that, and again, I would just say it's just not something that we were looking at or
okay.
with Romson. And I will say, helpful. Yeah. One last thing, Elaine. I will say, like Lucille said, Romson's, you know, continuing to look at stuff. We're really showing where we think it's going, but he's continuing to kind of study it. Some additional things that I don't think we were ready to bring.
Well, I think in the comments time, I think I'll have some further commentary, and I just hope that maybe you will, you know, relay some of that as you go into that public process. So I'll turn it over to Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all the additional detail. Lucille, this is a little bit following up on what Elaine was saying as well. You mentioned that, and you actually showed some of Romson's studio work that includes a lot more detail than what I think are placeholders at this point. You know, they're more related to his work, but they are placeholders. Do you feel that the porcelain enamel treatment is going to enable you to work at that level with Romson in terms of some, smaller scale details, as well as potentially larger portions of color akin to what you showed us in his already accomplished work?
Yes, absolutely. So the porcelain metal fabricator we're working with and who that will be working on this project is part of our coral fabricators that I'm also working with on other projects. And the level of layering that Romson's working on, and Romson's also working with his graphic designer to provide us with vector files, which is the best way to really hone in on detail when fabricating artwork with this method of fabrication. I think will really lend itself well to his work and his detail. And the fact that Romson has a somewhat limited, very bold color palette is absolutely lending itself well to that method of fabrication as well.
Okay. And what's your time frame for that kind of detail showing up in a final design for the artwork?
So
currently?
the artist's timeline and his scope of work is slated to deliver final designs by Q2 of 2023. So it's pretty fast. That's the reason why we took suggestions from the subcommittee back in April and really made sure that the selected artists would be able to really dive in head first into designing for the station. So Romson's really pretty far ahead, considering that he's been under contract since July 2022, and really the most constrained timeline is for his community engagement efforts to take place. But we are very confident that the schedule we're sharing is going that we'll be able to adhere to it.
So that arrow leading to February would be when that level of
Yes.
detail
So
would be,
I
would be
believe
available.
that by the time that Romson will be presenting the artwork for the station at the PAC, his artwork would be fairly finalized.
Okay. I think actually I'll stick to questions. Sorry. Later. Thanks. I also want to ask, there was a reference to Coast Salish imagery or stories or thinking that is influencing some of his work. Is he working directly with any members of local tribes on this?
That is going to be part of his outreach efforts. One thing that Romson's been very adamant to clarify is that when he's looking at a location, his intent is to honor and reference the historical, cultural history of the place. But in no way is Romson going to deliver native design. That is something that I think Romson will be able to speak to a little bit more closely when he presents to the PAC in February or March.
Okay. Thank you. I think that was it for Lucille. I had a couple of other questions. Just a sec. Thanks. Is there, just for the team, is there, Thornton Creek is being referenced in an abstract way in landscape. Is there any more direct connection to Thornton Creek, which is actually adjacent to the site, flows fairly closely?
No,
This is
so
for
we
any.
don't. We don't have any actual direct connections. I know before we thought about maybe having interpretive signage, but instead we decided to go with the Sound Transit sustainability signage. So yeah, in the design, you'll just see it just references it abstractly.
The art will indeed tie back to Thornton Creek.
And possibly direct people in that direction, or just speak to it in the work?
That is not something that's been discussed so far, but that's something that the artist could take into consideration.
We, as well as part of the standard Sound Transit customer signage program, we have empty maps at every one of the stations. So Thornton Creek could certainly be identified as a destination in terms of the local connections on those.
One other question that relates maybe to the comment that was made earlier about an urban village, potential urban village. One of the things I think, Catherine, you showed comments from the community that referenced small shops and cafes near the transit station. Is that something that's a desire only at this point, or is that something that has legs and has some kind of connection with what might happen in the context of the station area? Areas.
Just to speak to that.
I can speak to that. So we are studying alternatives that would look at mixed use development on the east side of I-5, so along Fifth Avenue, directly across from the station, and then extending across and down Roosevelt Way. So that was something that we heard from the community, particularly on the east side of I-5, that they would like to see more retail. On the west side of I-5, there was less interest in that because the community really sees the Aurora corridor as a lot of opportunity to develop more retail, and so that was kind of the preferred location for that side of, for that community, for the Holler Lake community, was to see more retail along the Aurora corridor. But yes, that is something that is being studied as part of our environmental review. Zoning that would allow that.
Great. One last question. When you talk about increased transparency, I'm not exactly a wonk about this, but do you have some kind of numbers about how much you increased the transparency of the structure between the last time we saw this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have concrete numbers, but I will say, everywhere around, the stairs used to be opaque, so that whole area around the stairs that we were showing transparent had opaque metal panels previously. Generally, on the upper level of the station, we've always had kind of the glazing up there, and we just kind of refined the way that all works together and the way the metal panels work at the upper level. So the primary reaction was right at the entries on both the north and the south plaza, where we did get kind of a reaction on the opacity that we had around the stair cores.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass this on, I think, to Pooja.
No, pass it to Matt.
Matt, sorry.
Pooja is recused.
That's right, I forgot. So Matt.
Sorry, I was muted. I'm saying we're over time. I can skip questions and let's just go directly to comments.
Thank you. I know, sorry, Matt, we always have you dangling at the last, and we're
I don't need to drag it on. I have comments that are more important, so I'm ready to go.
So we asked Jill, we came up with 4 areas of deliberation points. I think maybe in the interest of time, doing it collectively and not individually might be the best use of our time. Yeah, and we have a hard stop at noon, so.
And you had an hour laid out.
Yeah, I think we should talk about the art separate from the architecture.
So we have 4 topics.
Let's get it down to 2 then. So let's start with community engagement and equity and art and integration. So we'll go through those together and ask people, only if you have a comment that hasn't already been brought up, to comment on it. And let's try to do that in if we kept that to 20 minutes, we could be in good shape. And I just want you to know that I've got my power cord and my battery's running down, so it makes me freaking out. It's just because of that.
And I think we were,
I got better.
okay. And I think we were gonna go to our virtual.
We were gonna, yeah.
So Matt,
Outreach and
the topic is art, outreach, and equity. We'll start with Matt, and then go to Elizabeth and Elaine.
Oh, okay. So we could talk about art? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Great. I'm excited by the general, I guess, ideas of the artist. I want to encourage substantial materiality of the art. It appears, I know it's really early, it appears to be rendered as a sort of a painted graphic, and I think that would be really problematic, or it would be a really missed opportunity. And so I would encourage the designers and the artists to look for ways to get materiality. And I know we talked, there was a discussion of enamel porcelain, maybe those are tiles, and one of the renderings, maybe that's good. But in other renderings, it appears that the art kind of, it looks like it might be painted either on a metal surface or on the concrete. And I'd just like to say, I think it'd be really great if we could figure out whether that materiality is, laser cuts metal or steel. When it's on the concrete, is there any way you could cast it in rather than just paint it on the surface? I think that would be, would really help the art be significant. I do want to echo one of the comments. I'm not sure if it was from Elaine, but that I think that the glyphs and the iconography is fascinating and really rich, and I appreciate that. I do really think that there needs to be tribal involvement if there's any reference to tribal iconography. I think the boundaries are about appropriation of Native art because of the history that's occurred need to really be paid attention to, especially in a public project. So I would just encourage that there's tribal involvement with the art. If, I just think we can't use tribal cultural iconography as clip art. And I'm not saying that's what's happening, but I just want to put that out there as a, as a something to really pay attention to, which I'm sure you are. I like the idea of the art on the massive columns. Again, I think that's a great opportunity. But again, I know they're probably precast offsite. I'm sure they're precast offsite, but is there a way that maybe more of that, and maybe they are cast in? The slide on 43, this is a minor thing, is slide 43 is kind of confusing. The side view of the column, I don't think is an accurate representation. And as an architect, I got stuck on that. It looks to me, the side view there shows as if there's that rectilinear panel, but there isn't. It's almost horizontal. You know what I mean? It's this underside of the beam where you would be having art, I guess. Does that make sense to you guys? I got stuck on that for far too long.
reflective in.
It's just the drawing isn't correct, right? So I guess those are my comments. Art materiality, what is it? How is that going to be made substantial? And from terms of equity standpoint, making sure there's tribal involvement on that.
Thanks, Matt. Are we going to Elaine and then Elizabeth?
Sure, I'll go. So on the art integration, I think, some of my questions were alluding to how I was feeling about the art as it's being shown in the proposal. And so I thought I heard someone at Sound Transit say that this, it's pretty much set in terms of where it lives within the project, but then I also heard that this isn't final. And so I think I'm excited about this artist, and I do think that this is going to be sort of the major element of distinction that's going to carry this station. And I want to see more of it. I want to color outside the lines, to use sort of a bad analogy, but it feels so prescriptive to me right now. It feels like here are the panels that you can put your art on. And so that's why I was asking, like, is this what the artist came up with? Because I would love to see it bolder. I'd love to see it bleeding up into the transparent materials. I feel like it is constrained right now. And I'd also love to see it bleed into the platform. When I think about, being on the train and getting off the train, the only real element of distinction that gives that upper platform character is the blue. And I'm like, we can do something more than just a color, can't we? So I really want to encourage more of this. Let's see, what else did I have on here? The other comment I had about art was you have the bike lockers on the north end dead ending into this art canvas. And it seems to me like that's not an effective place for the art to have it be hidden like that. And so, if that's really going to be the case, it's like, well, maybe it can start creeping up or it can start creeping around. We talked about, last February about this building and wanting it to have more of a civic presence. And if this is truly going to be one of the elements of distinction, I would challenge sort of just sneaking it around that west side. Maybe people driving won't see it, but what about the people that are coming on the overpass on 130th? Everything right now seems to be oriented to the south and to the east. And with that, I'll turn it over to Elizabeth. Thank you.
I'll second what Matt and Elaine said. I think the art is doing a lot of heavy lifting in terms of elements of distinction and elements of delight on this project. And I think since the schedule is the schedule, the artist is coming in at a slightly slightly later time than the rest of the team. I appreciate that you're already working together. I think that the art can really work deftly with structure in order to create a really three-dimensional immersive experience. Needs a lot more collaborative work for that to happen. And I believe you, Lucille, that these are placeholders right now. I would strongly suggest that the scale of what's now a placeholder be examined as well. It's possible, as Amalia proposed lightly earlier, that there be some kind of lead in to the larger, more bolder, larger scale elements of artwork. I think there's some variation that can be explored as this final design comes up. I also appreciate that Lucille showed images of Romson's installations and his studio work. These are both 2- and 3-dimensional works, and his 2-dimensional works, which are up right now, have a lot of visual dimensionality to them. And so I'm strongly hoping that that's going to show up in this station, in the work for this station. You've already said that this is possible with porcelain enamel. And I think for art and architecture to really work strongly and collaboratively together, this needs to show up as soon as possible and be discussed. Matt referred to it as materiality. For me, it's both materiality and also dimensionality. What do people see when they're up close? What is seen from afar? This is going to be really important for this station, for that to work. We recently reviewed a fire station where that was considered, is being considered, and it's working. So I'm also going to suggest that this be reviewed. I know there's a potential for PAC in early 2023. I think the Design Commission should also see this work as it is being integrated, possibly in subcommittee, because our responsibility is to look at how the context of a place and also the architecture of a place and the artwork work together. So, and I don't think we have enough information right now. It's great that it's Romson. I think the aesthetic is spot on. It's going to take some work for this to really work strongly, as I know you all want. We all want. And with that, I'll pass it on back to the room, I think.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Jamal?
I have two discussion points. One, I think a perspective showing someone walking from 130th might actually show that some of that art on the south face is doing some heavy lifting as an attractor. So I think that would be an interesting thing to see. That is not meant to undercut anything people have said about how it could reach out even more. And secondly, I just want to go back to a point we made the last time and was shown on your slide, which is that there's a gap in the outreach from what you did in 2020 and what you're expecting the artists to pick up. And in an ideal process going forward, we wouldn't have those kinds of gaps. And we wouldn't expect the artists perhaps to do so much heavy lifting and restarting. So I just wanted to put that out.
Fabulous. So first, I have kind of two sections of the color integration with the art and then some of the art locations. So in terms of color integration with the art, I know that you mentioned that the blue was discussed within the early community engagement, and I'm seeing in the renderings and in the elevations that it's this really brilliant blue. And in the materials that I'm seeing in the room, it's a lot more gray. And so I have some concerns about whether that blue is going to, one, function as the wayfinding device that you intend to use it as, in the way that it does clearly appear to be in the elevations. Also, as you move forward with the community engagement alongside the artists, I'd be interested in that kind of blue and its combination with the art being something that's continued to be discussed, and just making sure that that blue reads as a wayfinding element alongside the art. I think it's incredibly strong in the drawings of the spaces. Also in that, so that contrast in materials that appears in the artist's work, I think again is strong in the elevations and in the renderings. And I worry about the kind of grays in that as well. I also just making sure that those darker grays at the ground level are dark enough that they're really showing that contrast. I think that increase of the linearity and the contrast between the two in the drawings is reading well. So making sure that the materials are truly giving you that, I think would be quite helpful. In terms of art locations, I'll try to make it brief because we've had people speak to this already. I would, to Jill's point, look at how the art is already showing itself when you're coming across 130th, but consider wrapping it potentially on the 130th side. You mentioned the WSDOT standard to prevent visibility from the roadway, distraction from the roadway. But my curiosity would be if you could keep that wrapping low enough that you have the bright attractor as you cross as a pedestrian or a bicyclist. I know that Jonathan mentioned the increased funding potentially for widened sidewalks coming across 130th. So if from a pedestrian view, we could see that art start to wrap, but if from a car view, you're not seeing that brightness as much, I think that could be really valuable. Let's see. Also, this came up briefly about the bike blockers in front of the art on the facade. If there's opportunity to integrate the art into that materiality of the bike blockers, I think that starts to wrap the plaza space in a way that could emphasize the way that you created a community space in that area. And then I'll just second the idea of integration at the platform level, whether that is in a linear way with the glazing or whether that is bringing some of the enamel up into that, that platform environment, whether
would support that idea as well. Thank you. Great, thank you. I don't have a lot to add, but I'm really pleased to hear about Ronson's process. It sounds great. The workshops, engagements, and the opportunity to potentially work with high school students is a great way to, equitable outcomes, or when people in the neighborhood can see themselves in the space, and if they're part of that process, that will be the result. So I'm really excited by all of that. And I didn't hear anything that I thought was problematic in it. Well, there was talk about the glyphs drawing from native iconography, but I thought it was really more from his own cultural background that he was building on, and also being inspired by the place names that the native peoples had here. So that all sounded excellent. I do think there were some really good points made about it's being applied in very different materialities. And so is it always a porcelain tile solution, or is that a different solution, and what makes sense where? How is that going to be both cohesive but work in all of those contexts and be durable? And I'm assuming you're not doing paint on CMU, but what will endure and keep its color, because color is so significant. And I guess I'm the last one, so we could move on to the next topic.
Yes, which is, so the next topic is circulation and the right-of-way experience, as well as the experience of the spaces and the aesthetic. So it's about the architecture, the landscape architecture. And what we had in previous comments were about the choices of materials, plants, colors, finishes, furnishings, lighting, capacity to light, color, story for the planting, bioretention, focus on the elements of distinction, cohesion, and ground plan landscape, as well as all of the modes of access to the site. Because I think we heard comments and questions about just about every mode. Right? So I think those are our discussion topics for this next round.
And are we going back to our virtual attendees first?
Yeah.
Matt, Elaine, and then Elizabeth.
I'm back. Can you skip me and can I come back? I stepped away to use the restroom.
Sure. Why don't we go to Elaine?
Okay. So in terms of architecture, I think one of the, sort of, I guess, an overriding comment from me is that, I did talk about that west elevation was the ability of this station to read as a, civic landmark. And so, I do appreciate the work that has been done to make some further refinements to, I guess the coloring of the facade. But I do still think that it doesn't really rise to a level of prominence that I don't know. I don't think that it sort of reaches a level of design excellence that we would expect within the city of Seattle. With that said, I'm gonna encourage some further exploration of that, and maybe we'll make some summary comments later. I'll encourage some further exploration of that when we get to ST3, because I want to respect where this project is in the process. But in terms of refinement of some of the changes to materiality, I think I'll talk about the transparency and the new panels that are evident around the stair towers, and I do think that they help. I alluded to this earlier. I kind of feel like there's this sandwich effect that's happening right now, where you have this layer of the art, and then you have the layer of the transparency, and then you have this openness.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's been an attempt to sort of respond to, comments that we've had, which I really appreciate. But I'd love to see a more integrated approach to it. And I think that's why I was asking if the artists perhaps might be comfortable working on a transparent panel. Could the two combine together? Like, could there be more transparency below in some areas? Could the art maybe get a little bit more vertical? Right now, it feels very constrained and prescriptive to me. So maybe that's something to explore in the public art process. And then, I know that you have called out elements of distinction on the west side of the building, and that really speaks to, I think, just the materials that are being used. But as sort of a large civic presence, I'm not sure that you'll have a real appreciation for that materiality, from the very important rights of way, like I-5 and 130th. And so I think that's where, in the future, would like to be able to see more character and distinction. But I recognize that the ship has probably sailed on this one. Was accessibility part of this, Jill?
Yes.
Okay. The other comment that I had made, I think a couple of times, was seeing if there were opportunities to improve the accessible ramp experience on the north end of the building. And I haven't seen any improvements to that or how that was addressed at all. I'm really disappointed in that. It still really functions to me as a utilitarian path to get people from the parking lot into the building. And so that's disappointing, and to me feels secondary for somebody who, maybe not only is in a wheelchair, but people who have strollers and luggage. I think that there's actually going to be a lot of use of that pathway, and would have liked to have seen some further distinction there. And then the other part of the accessibility is I recognize that there's sort of very, what are today like very prescriptive sort of paving approaches to wayfinding. And I'd love to see some more of an architectural expression, or how those could be integrated as a design expression in the future. That granite wayfinding path is a very distracting element to me visually, and it's probably meant to be distracting because it provides the contrast that visually impaired people might need. But does it have to be so skinny? Could it be wider? Could it feel more like a pathway as opposed to just sort of a line that's running through the pavement? It's felt odd to me at all of the stations that I visited. And then let's see, did I have anything else on my list here? And my last comment, I think, is on site furniture on the benches. I wasn't sure if those were concrete or stone. I guess I'm concerned about them feeling cold and people sitting on them. And then also from an accessibility standpoint, I've heard that, to make them more inclusive, there are, some older populations that could probably appreciate a backrest on the seating. So something to consider. And I'll turn it over to Matt. Thanks.
Thanks. Thank you. I think if we could switch to slide 59. If we could, thanks. I want to, I thank you. I do agree with Elaine's comments, and just want to expand on that a little bit. And just in general, that, these, I recognize the incredible complexity that the design team and is facing on these projects, but I do agree that we'd like to push for further architectural design excellence, if you will. And it does, as we talked about this, it does appear that the art and the sort of creek blue that's denoting vertical circulation is really doing a lot of work. And a couple observations I have with the two pavilions that we have, or the stair towers, if you will. The way they were rendered right now, they are kind of tripartite. You have the metal panel that has the art, you have the perforated panel, and then you have what appears to be open or transparent above. And, maybe that's lacking some hierarchy. So, I mean, for example, what if the perforated panel was gone and it was all glass, or that there was instead of an equal, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, there was a more dynamic proportion of, something this big and then something that big, and contrast and hierarchy between those things. I think it's a little mushy right now in terms of proportion and in terms of that materiality. So that's just a critique to offer. I also think there may be more thought going into the materiality of the architecture. And I bring that up because of the way these renderings are expressing it. And it's almost, there's so much of this materiality in this rendering that's expressed as this sort of like neutral 20% gray, including the concrete, including the steel, including the fascia, including the framing. Everything is this like 25% light gray. So maybe it just hasn't been considered yet, but that leads me to think like, why not make the architectural elements, meaning the steel columns, the roof edge fascia, the framing of the curtain wall, why not make those in contrast to the color of the concrete of the guideway? And really say, okay, I've got this guideway that's concrete, but then I've got this architectural element that is something completely different. And it appears to me that that's not, but by looking at these renderings, that's not what's happening yet. Everything is kind of this wash of like 25% gray. And maybe that's just because it hasn't been considered yet, but I think that creates an opportunity for really differentiating the architecture, meaning the roof and the walls and the structure and the enclosure of the pavilions, as really distinct from the floor plane, the concrete, and then of course the guideway overhead, which is always going to be what it is, precast concrete. So there's just some thoughts. And then I think one other thought, if we go to the slide of materials, let's back up and find it. I'm not sure. Materials of distinction, elements of distinction, I guess, is slide 34. Yeah, I guess what I would say is that these aren't that distinct, and they're not that distinct relative to the elements of continuity. And both in terms of what they are, but also in terms of their value, color value and stuff. So I'm not saying it needs more color. I'm just saying the elements of distinction aren't super distinct. And maybe because everything's kind of feeling like it's all in this middle range, except for the creek blue panel. And I don't know, maybe there's another approach that could help it get either hierarchy or take some stronger design attitudes, I guess. Ground face CMU is fine, but I don't really think it's very distinct. If it's really meant to be distinct, I kind of think of that as more of a background. Ground face CMU is fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not super distinct. And then the metal panel and dark silver, and then the gray panel, it's a lot of gray. And when you consider how much concrete there is, which is in and of itself gray, especially when it's wet or damp, it really feels like that just might be lending to a little too much of that palette aesthetic. So just maybe there's that's something for exploration, and it would take some of the load off of the landscaping, the planting, and the art in terms of trying to make this achieve civic character. Anyway, that's about it. I'll pass it on to other people. And thanks, for all this information for us to review.
Thanks, Matt. Elizabeth?
Just referring to a couple things that Elaine and Matt said about the temperature of seating, the temperature of the architecture. I think just looking at this slide, it's kind of cold out today, and these are all cool. These are all elements that are cool. very famous painting teacher talked about dark light, warm, cool. And I think it's something to really think of especially in a space where you're going to want people you want people to be delighted. You've already said that. You want people to be warm and welcome. And so I think I acknowledge the schedule. I'm glad this station is coming online. It's been a hustle, and I appreciate that hustle. I hope you can carve out some space to have some actual delightful collaborations with the artists to bring some of that warmth into, it's not just the artist who's going to do it, but definitely for the art to collaborate with structure and really think in a somewhat of a playful way. What if we change this? What if we move that? What if this were small? What if this were tall? Where does this belong? Could this be glass? How many what ifs can you still put into this in order to affect a really powerful place for people to come? And I think I'll pass it on. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth and Molly.
I'm just thinking. So I just want to, before I make my comments, I want to recognize that there are a lot of players at play here, particularly related to circulation. I know that there's bus and WashDOT and SDOT and Sound Transit, and I know everyone is looking at this and the lines of it. I think one of the challenges for me in articulating my comments is the lines of exactly where the improvements that are being made by Sound Transit are a little blurry. And I know that there's a lot of things that are in play and that there's future contribution that Sound Transit can make. And so I think before I make my comments about access to the site, I want to acknowledge that there's been a lot of thought, particularly about the bus stops and making more space for them since we first saw this. And I see that really coming through, and that's been really thoughtful. And I see how this has been integrated in all the conversations related to site circulation and just having more space for people to enter the site. There's really been a large change, and I see much more space being allocated from initial. So I want to commend that. But that being said, I still have significant concerns about the circulation and access to this site. And two that are really concerning to me, where I feel like there has been prioritization of vehicles and not the vehicles that are bringing the vulnerable users to this site, the transit dependent users to this site. So one is the continuation of the bike lane from across 130th. And I have continued concerns about the Pork Chop Island and how a future bike lane that is going to be on the east side of Fifth Avenue, south of 130th, is going to get the cyclists across 130th and onto the shared use path. And my concerns about that are not necessarily the continuation of people going north to Shoreline. My concern is the cyclists actually getting to the station base area to park their bikes. And when you look at a larger map and you zoom out from what's on any of the maps, there is a significant community, and Patrice mentioned that this would be an area where density would probably get heightened in the future. That there needs to be, I'm worried that there's not space allocated right now for that, and we are prioritizing turns off WashDOT. And I think I would just encourage SDOT, Sound Transit to push back on the concerns about the vehicular access. This has been reconfigured. Access has been limited on this for multiple years. It will continue to be limited until 2026 when this opens. And I think there's been some significant pattern changes. And so I worry about the future access and the boarding and delightings and how you've put this on here of both the bus and access for that corner. So I'll leave it at that. And then the second piece is about the paratransit. And I don't have a good sense of how many of those are, but I think it's really unfortunate that the paratransit will have to go down Fifth Avenue, go into the parking area, and turn around before it can let people off. And I can see a scenario where someone's sitting in the paratransit, it's already taking a lot to get on and off, and they're seeing the most recent train leave the station, literally, and they're sitting there waiting for cues as people have stopped and picked up people in that area. So I still have significant concerns. And then my last thing is, I think there's a lot of signage and striping, and I had wished that there would been something more about how the actual right-of-way looked, about how that user experience is on Fifth Avenue, particularly looking to the north, because you have a really nice, elevated bikeway that transitions down to it's effectively going to be an at-grade shared use path with what appears to be a concrete buffer. And so you're really losing some of that prioritization of this area as a pedestrian cycling access, because we're really limiting the cars, especially if that past parking lot is now minimized and restored. I think this is going to be, I can see a future where this gets pretty congested during peak times when people are getting dropped off by single occupancy vehicles. And I don't see any way around that. So I just hope that those conversations are continued, and I wish that was more integrated into this conversation, and there was more of a presentation about how SDOT and WashDOT and Sound Transit have been really coordinating thus far on this. And then the last piece I'll say is that there's a lot of emphasis on this kind of north entrance and the ramp and the bike parking, and I just think that some of that could potentially be moved to the center or to the south, because I think that particularly the bike access is going to be pretty limited on that north side. So I will stop there.
The only thing I want to say is I'm always struck at these presentations by how many other agencies show up. And yet I become aware of why they talk is what the gaps still are. So I understand that it's enormous. I understand that you've rounded up a huge cast of characters, but I have to kind of reinforce Amalia that so much of what's going to happen here is dependent on the area work being done, and it's a little tough to put it all together. But I am always impressed by the number of people who do show up. It's just a huge task.
Right, and I'm gonna walk over to the wall, but if you wouldn't mind just pulling up the elevation so that the people on the screen can see it. So one of the biggest things, so I've already advocated for the brightness of this blue, but also thinking from the view that Matt had us pull up, where that blue is visible. One, I really appreciate that there's been this increased transparency. I think that circulation up to platform is a huge part of the civic importance of these areas of the station. And the transparency helps with the legibility of that. I would advocate that whether it's plausible on this station or it's something that we consider as we move forward with the rest of Wisbly, thinking about the ways that these materials can respond to essentially the diagram of that circulation. So where we have, right now we have the datum pulling across and you have transparency to this diagram of the injury sequence, really thinking about either how these mullions can respond to that angle, or how these material transitions can respond to that angle, I think is really important to how this opens up as more of a big piece of architecture, and how it reads in the distance as this thing that can be traversed up to as a pedestrian, so that I understand how I occupy that space. So that's something that I would advocate for. I also am just curious about the flexibility in art integration into this as well. So that's whether it can be integrated into this station, whether some of this art can move up along that plane, or if that's something that we're considering for future stations, is as the art is integrated and fabricated by Sound Transit, what can that palette of where that can be integrated, whether it's into glazing or whether it's integrating these types of channels. Really just thinking about what is that palette and how in this station or in future stations can we celebrate that experience of rising up to these stations that are along the guideway.
And I'll pass it along.
Great. I think the only additional comments I have to make, and then I'll turn over to a wrap up. I would say the benches, maybe adding on to, you know, Elaine commented on the comfort and materiality, but, and I understand it seems to be in the standard line, but it didn't seem to me like there were enough places where, let's say Colin with her two friends were all gonna sit on the same bench and they'd have that place to sit. It just felt like they were probably partly to prevent people from sleeping on them. I'm guessing that's half the reason for the armrests, that we realize that armrests help you get up. They're also preventing, you know, comfort sometimes, that you scale those and have enough space for people, the amount of people that are going to be meeting up and the amount of people that might be together. And also just be careful when you use boulders and plazas. They really need to be of a scale that is effective. And it just looked like 3 small boulders, which I think could be really weak and watered down and not effective. So just really think to the detail on that. And then I will do my wrap up and then go to Jill. I want to give you the opportunity if there's anything the team wants to clarify or add. Just giving you a couple of minutes to do that, but please don't go on for 10 minutes.
And we've been trying to do that more with presenters to make sure, we have a series of items that we want to talk about, but we want to make sure that we covered everything, or if there's any kind of clarifications that would be helpful.
I think just with the art, we're not using paint anywhere except for that guy column, that will be porcelain animal throughout the station.
And porcelain tile on the inside.
Yeah. That's the only thing I noted.
Great. I'll try to summarize things at a high level, not repeat everything. I'll say that there is generally, we really appreciate the hard work this team has been doing. We know this has been an accelerated schedule. We really value this station, it's an infill station, and what it's going to do to these neighborhoods to the east and west. And we very much want to see this project moving forward on schedule. So just putting that out there. And I think in some ways we're getting to the details now in our comments, and it feels like a long road, but you know, even the little things are really important. At the scale of this project, the little things can sometimes be quite big. We are very excited to see the art coming in, to see that integration starting. There are some questions about whether the same materiality works everywhere, if the art can, in some cases, maybe go outside of the frame, and hoping that the artist is made limited, but that there's thoughts to that, and even go up to the platform level to think about the users from that experience and the people coming across over the bridge over I-5. In terms of access, you know, we appreciate the infrastructure that's being put in for buses and the planning with King County and the paratransit drop. And, you know, really this has been getting better and better, but there are still concerns about how the circulation of paratransit through drop off with the number of potential single occupancy vehicle drop offs are going to happen. And is there enough study given to how that's going to work, you know, and not prioritize the single user driver over paratransit and buses, and the future of bicycle infrastructure. And this is our opportunity to make this intersection really future thinking and making sure that we are setting up for all of the future pedestrian and bicycle needs that we're going to have here, especially since OPCD is looking at this as an urban village, which really excited to hear that, and that process is moving forward, and that can bring in some of the things we're hearing the community wants, including, you know, the cafes and whatnot that would really add value to a station here. You know, maybe still on circulation, the accessible ramp on the north side is very functional. It's going to get people where they need to go, but could there, you know, as Elaine likes to use this word, be more delight in that experience? We'd like to see some continued thinking about that. I think there's different ways that that probably could be accomplished. Talking, you know, when we get to the specifics of the architecture, there were a lot of comments about perhaps there is too much neutrality, that while we appreciate there's more transparency on the vertical circulation, just looking at the detail of how that's played out, both Matt and Elaine made some really good comments, as did others. So continued development of the transparency and bringing the architecture to a level of distinction with civic character. Missed anything?
I think the only other thing a lot of people in this room know how hard that is to do, so thank you for the clarity. I think the only other thing is I think it's very clear that you would like a subcommittee on how the art is being advanced with the architecture. The details of which will, you know, have to work out, maybe not in real time, but I think that there's value in that, and I think you heard that from.
Could I add a clarifying comment? I just wanted to clarify that my concern is that there will be a SIP plan set associated with this improvement that will set curbs and set dimensions that I worry will never be able to be changed again, because once this station is operational, it will be very hard to come back and change those things when it is in operation. And I want to make sure that we are not setting things that will preempt the best practice facilities and the facilities that need to accommodate vulnerable users and transit dependent users in this neighborhood. So I just want to, I wanted to be more succinct in my comment.
And I suspect that John Lather and Tammy Frederick are taking notes. I think in the interest of time, we should probably call for a vote, and then if there's no formal wrap up from Jill.
Well, I can read what I've got.
Okay.
It repeats a lot of it, so I'll try to. SDC thanks Sound Transit for moving the timeline up for the station. It's a major commitment. It's greatly appreciated. An excellent start to our collaborative ST3 work. We thank you for responding to the recommendations of previous full commission and subcommission meetings. We thank you for the collaboration with the different agencies whose work around the station will complete the experience. I believe that we're going to recommend approval of this 90% milestone with the following condition, which is an SDC subcommittee for art review. And we have some specific recommendations about more integration. I don't know that I need to repeat all this, because I really think Benita got all of that in terms of the details of this. But for our further work together, we have some recommendations that public engagement be continuous and deeply focused on equity, with artists brought on early and joining an already robust effort, and that further exploration as ST3 evolves at the architectural level of prominence as these buildings as civic landmarks and striving for design excellence, integration of design elements, disciplines, and other agencies. We've made a good start, but we're not at the level we'd like to be going forward. So with that, I think we would vote.
And we can start in the room, and then our friends online, Amalia.
I'm going to vote no, because I do not feel that with the timeline shown on the last slide of infrastructure being completed by Q2 of 2023, that there has been adequate response to an advancement of the multimodal access for the Sound Transit required frontage improvements.
I'm going to vote yes.
I'm going to approve with the conditions and recommendations that Jill mentioned.
I'll vote to approve.
Elaine,
I will vote to approve.
Elizabeth?
Vote to approve with conditions and recommendations.
And Matt? I have you on mute.
Thank you. I also vote to approve with the conditions and recommendations.
Thank you, Matt. So that was 6-1. Thank you. Benita, any closing? Other than what you succinctly did? Or
Yeah, pretty good closing, but I think some of our comments, as people said, are thinking to the future of ST3 and wanting to make sure that these stations are developed with an eye towards distinction of architecture, just superficial distinction. I don't mean that in any way to be insulting, but that there is a real opportunity here for civic expression, elevation of character that we hope to see in the future Sound Transit work.
I just think where this was when we started this journey, how many years ago and where it is today, that incremental changes are notable and they're driven by this amazing group of people who are collaborating together to look for the best possible outcome. So thank you for that commitment. I know that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do, Julie, but you're doing it together. And I think that's the point that the commissioners keep hitting on, is that collaboration is going to spell success here, but also for a future relationship with WSBO. And
Yeah, and really it's to the, my staff and all of our consultants.
Oh.
And a good project director. But yeah, thanks. It is the, I've started saying now there's nothing more public than public transit, and everybody gets involved, and the collaboration is very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly with this team. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioners, we're due back at 12:30 for a short business session, and until 1:30 at the latest. So we'll go ahead and pause for this meeting and pick up at 12:30. Thank you, Elaine, Elizabeth, and Matt. We'll see you at 12:30.
Okay. Thank you.